Chapter 831. Zhang Pinger was right. Zhang Xiaohua, who was leisurely sitting on the back of the odd beast, had not thought of the desire to become an inner sect disciple at Lingering Fragrance Peak. He only looked at the inconceivably huge Lingering Fragrance Peak in front of him. His gaze scanned the mountain peak where he could not see a single person. He thought to himself, "Where is that damn Zhongpei?" The Yixiang Peak in front of Zhang Xiaohua was not what Zhang Xiaohua had imagined. He had been to Baiyue Peak, Tianmu Peak, and Shixin Peak. In Zhang Xiaohua's impression, the 19 peaks were about the same size and Yixiang Peak should be about the same size as Shixin Peak. But when he really saw Yixiang Peak, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. Could this still be called a peak? This mountain peak was almost 10 times the size of Shixin Peak, towering in front of him like a huge monster. Illusory clouds and mist were entwined around the mountainside of the mountain peak. There were all kinds of verdant trees, brightly blooming flowers, and other strange plants that painted the mountain peak with gorgeous colors. Not long after, flocks of white cranes, hawks, phoenixes, and many other birds that Zhang Xiaohua was not familiar with flew from different parts of the mountain peak. Clear chirping sounds were heard and rushed into the white mist of the mountainside. A huge hole was created in the white mist, and the green mountain peak was exposed. Not long after, when the hole was about to be covered by the clouds and mist, more birds flew down from above the clouds and mist and swept away the clouds and mist. No wonder it is the peak where the inner disciples of the incense cult live. The Yixiang Peak's qi of heaven and earth is much stronger than Shixin Peak. In such a place rich in qi of heaven and earth, even if it is not the way of immortality, it is very easy to make progress. It is not surprising that Yixiang Peak has peacock, Qinchun, and other rare experts in Jianghu. Zhang Xiaohua woke up from the moment of surprise and unconsciously thought, according to what Bai Huan said, Yixiang Peak is said to be suspended in the air. Such a huge mountain peak. What kind of magical power is needed? Seeing the true appearance of the Lingering Fragrance Peak from afar, Zhang Xiaohua urged the 4 odd beasts to hurry forward. Although they were already very close to the Lingering Fragrance Peak, there was still a distance to reach it. Seeing that the sky was turning dark, Zhang Xiaohua finally arrived at the foot of the mountain. Previously, he had seen the enormous size of Yixiang Peak, but when he arrived in front of it, he was no longer as shocked as before. This was because all he could see was an incomparably spacious mountain path paved with blue stone slabs. As far as the eye could see, there was also a mountain peak. Zhang Xiaohua glanced at the entrance to the mountain and was just about to head over when his eyes lit up. He saw a 3-foot-tall stone tablet buried in the ground. Walking to the front of the stone tablet, Zhang Xiaohua jumped down and saw that there were 3 big words written on the stone tablet, Sect of Spreading Fragrance. The 3 big words were written in an ancient style, and there was an indescribable charm between the strokes. There were also some indescribable patterns around the stone tablet. They were somewhat similar to the patterns on the small shield that Zhang Xiaohua had just obtained. Zhang Xiaohua was very curious and squatted down. Just as he was about to touch it with his hand, someone suddenly shouted, "Stop!" Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He had already carefully looked around, and there were no traces of people around the entrance of the mountain path. Now that someone suddenly appeared, how could Zhang Xiaohua, who had always been aware of the surrounding movements, not be surprised? Zhang Xiaohua raised his head and saw a few disciples in white rushing over from the blue stone path. The person in front was like moving clouds and flowing water. It was obvious that his qigong was superb. His body was in the air, but there was anger on his face. He pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and scolded, "Who are you? Why did you barge into Lingering Fragrance Peak?" The disciple in white approached and immediately asked. There was a dense killing intent between his brows. Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. He knew that he was lacking in etiquette. He cupped his hands and smiled apologetically. "This one is originally a disciple of the Pill Excavating Hall. I was appointed as an inner sect disciple by the sect leader. Today, I came to Lingering Fragrance Peak. As it is my first time here, I do not know the rules. When I saw the stone tablet buried in the ground, I found it very interesting." After hearing that Zhang Xiaohua was a disciple of the Pill Excavating Hall, and seeing that he was young, the disciple's expression softened. However, he still scolded, Since you came to Lingering Fragrance Peak to do business, the elders in the hall should have already informed you of the rules. The stone tablet in Lingering Fragrance Peak is an important item. How could they not warn you and allow you to offend it so frivolously? Stone tablet? Zhang Xiaohua was taken aback. He immediately smiled apologetically and said, "This senior, please understand. This one was on duty at another mountain peak. When I heard the inner sect's envoy pass down the sect leader's decree, I had to rush to Lingering Fragrance Peak within 10 days. This one did not have the time to return to the pill excavating hall. This one's martial arts skills are weak and my qigong is not good. I only relied on this beast to travel. Counting with my fingers, it is already the 10th day. Of course, I did not know the rules of Lingering Fragrance Peak." Oh, that white-clothed disciple's expression softened even more. Looking at Huan, he smiled and said, "So that's how it is. Junior brother's words are reasonable. Seeing that you really don't know anything, I won't pursue the matter any further." Then, he looked at the sky and pointed to the mountain path behind him. He said, "Quickly go over." When Zhang Xiaohua saw that the disciple had let him off so easily, he was slightly astonished. It was very different from his previous impression of Lingering Fragrance Peak. However, he still smiled and cupped his hands. He did not ride Huan anymore. Instead, he held Huan's hand and walked towards the mountain path of Lingering Fragrance Peak. At the side, the several disciples in white stood quietly and stared at Zhang Xiaohua's back. Zhang Xiaohua's back was facing them. He felt their gazes and felt that it was strange. Was his back very outstanding? While he was thinking, there seemed to be an invisible wall in front of him. With a bang, it crashed into Zhang Xiaohua's body. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and retreated 2 steps. He heard a mocking voice in his ear. This junior, didn't you want to go to Lingering Fragrance Peak? What? Did you not bring your waist token? I knew that your origin was a little strange. We are disciples of Lingering Fragrance Cult. Who doesn't know that this stone tablet is sacred and inviolable? You actually want to use your dirty hands to touch it. Disciples, go forward and capture him. I want to see where this thief came from. Zhang Xiaohua was enlightened when he heard the white-clothed disciple's words. He quickly released his divine sense, only to discover that there was a faint restriction in front of him. Due to Zhang Xiaohua's limited divine sense, he was unable to see the size of the restriction. As Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense moved upwards, the restriction also moved upwards. AI, how could I make such a low-level mistake? At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua finally understood why the other party had let him off so easily. Moreover, he was staring at him from behind. It turned out that he wanted to see if he was right. However, his waist token was kept in his money pouch, and he did not bring it with him. Moreover, he was greedy for the majesty of Lingering Fragrance Peak and did not release his divine sense. Thus, he bumped into the restriction. When he saw the white-clothed disciples swarming forward, Zhang Xiaohua immediately took out his waist token from his money pouch and shouted, "Fellow senior brothers, please stop." However, before he could finish his sentence, the disciple had already stabbed his sword into his left hand joint. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. He flicked his finger and hit the back of the sword. The disciple's hand trembled, and he almost lost control of his sword. While the disciple was still in shock, another disciple kicked Zhang Xiaohua's thigh. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to hesitate. He waved his hand and punched the disciple's foot. Pong! The disciple cried out in pain. He flipped over a few times and landed on the ground. He then sat down and hugged his foot. He wanted to scream but didn't dare to. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Pong." The white-clothed disciple who was leading the group was surprised. He smiled and said, "You are actually so skilled. If we capture you, this way we'll have a great merit." As he spoke, the disciple took out his sword and was about to step forward. Zhang Xiaohua did not want to fight with him. He waved his waist token and said, "Senior Brother Wei, you are mistaken. I do have a waist token." "Waist token?" Senior Martial Brother Wei said with a smile. "Of course I saw it. However, your waist token must be fake. Since your waist token was on you just now, why was it blocked by our Peak Guardian formation? Don't waste your time and let this Wei's sword also be useful." As he spoke, he floated up and stabbed with his sword. Zhang Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. He had just arrived at the lingering fragrance peak and had not even taken a single step onto the mountain path of the lingering fragrance peak. He was not afraid of them, but was there a need for this? She was a cultivator of the immortal Tao. If she fought with a martial expert, it would be bullying. Against these disciples, wouldn't it be bullying of the bullies? Zhang Xiaohua disdained to fight, let alone a misunderstanding. It had to be said that our Zhang Xiaohua now had the awareness of an expert. However, seeing that the sword was about to reach her eyebrows, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to fight. But just as she was about to make a move, her eyes suddenly lit up. Ignoring Senior Brother Wei's sword, she turned around and ran. "Io, you actually want to run?" Senior Brother Wei was happy. As a disciple who guarded the peak, Qinggong was the most important. His other martial arts might not be comparable to others, but this Qinggong was a great effort. But before he could use his Qinggong to chase, he saw the direction that Zhang Xiaohua was running in and laughed until he bent over. Pointing at Zhang Xiaohua's back, he said to the disciples beside him with a smile, "It is said that when a rabbit is anxious, it will jump over the wall. Look at this guy running towards Lingering Fragrance Peak." Of course, the direction that Zhang Xiaohua was running in was the limestone-paved mountain path of Lingering Fragrance Peak. But out of Senior Brother Wei's expectations, Zhang Xiaohua, who was holding the genuine Lingering Fragrance Peak Alchemy Disciple Waste token, was not blocked by the restriction at all. In a flash, she rushed up the mountain path. And at this moment, a scream sounded in front of Zhang Xiaohua. -4. Chapter 832. Zhang Xiaohua held the token in his hand and slammed it into the restriction. However, the token didn't have any energy fluctuations, so Zhang Xiaohua didn't pay much attention to it. Now that he heard Senior Brother Wei mention it, he paid attention and released his divine sense, ignoring Senior Brother Wei who was about to chase after him. The moment Zhang Xiaohua slammed into the restriction, a fluctuation was immediately emitted from the restriction. It swept across Zhang Xiaohua's body, and when it came into contact with the token in his hand, the token also emitted a fluctuation. When it came into contact with the fluctuation from the restriction, the two fluctuations disappeared, and a large gap appeared in the restriction. Zhang Xiaohua's figure passed through it. Before Zhang Xiaohua could admire the magic of the restriction, the scene in front of him made his heart skip a beat. At this moment, he saw that the mountain path was different from what he saw outside the mountain path. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua understood why he didn't see Senior Brother Wei and the others. It turned out that they were hiding in the restriction and observing him from afar. At the same time, Zhang Xiaohua stepped on the mountain path. Before he could retract his gaze from the strange scene, he heard a cry of surprise in front of him. "Is that Senior Brother?" Zhang Xiaohua looked up and saw the white-clothed woman who was walking down the steps with a surprised expression. Wasn't she Zhang Pinger who had gestured to him on Shixin Peak? Zhang Xiaohua was about to answer when he heard a few whooshing sounds behind him. The disciples who were guarding the peak had followed and surrounded Zhang Xiaohua in a semicircle. Zhang Xiaohu didn't have time to answer Zhang Pinger. He raised the token in his hand and shouted, "It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. Senior Brother Wei, didn't I say it was a misunderstanding? You see, I really do have a waist tag, and this waist tag is definitely real." Zhang Pinger walked a few steps forward and looked at Senior Apprentice Brother Wei with a frown. "I'm Distant Fire Hall's alchemy disciple, Zhang Pinger. Is there anything wrong with my junior apprentice brother?" Distant Fire Hall? Alchemy disciple? When Senior Brother Wei heard this, he also frowned and cupped his hands. "Greetings, Senior Sister Zhang. It's like this." Then, Senior Martial Brother Wei recounted what had just happened. "What? You said Junior Brother Rin was blocked outside by the restriction earlier, and he even offended the Xiu Monument?" Zhang Pinger's expression changed greatly as she turned around and asked, "Junior Brother Rin, you? How can you not know the rules of our Lingering Fragrance Peak?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at Zhang Pinger's expression and couldn't help but feel depressed. "How would I know what bullshit rules your Lingering Fragrance Peak has? I merely squatted down to take a look." However, he said with an aggrieved tone, "Senior Sister Zhang, you see, I was merely curious and wanted to know what the show monument looked like. I definitely didn't have any intention of profaning it. Furthermore, I didn't even touch it. How can it be considered as offending it? When Zhang Pinger heard this, her expression softened and she asked Senior Marshal Brother Wei, Junior Brother Wei, did my junior brother Ren touch the show monument? No. Then did he kick the show monument with his feet? No. Then how can you say that he offended the show monument? Senior Marshal Brother Wei's face darkened as he said, Senior Sister Zhang, you should know better than me what kind of status this show monument has in our lingering fragrance peak. Usually, every disciple who walks in front of it would be cautious and respectful. They wouldn't even dare to ride a horse. However, this junior apprentice brother actually squatted down and wanted to use his dirty hands to touch the show monument. If I hadn't stopped him in advance, his hands would have already touched it. But, Junior Marshal Brother Wei, is there a rule in the sect that says one can't squat down to look at the show monument? This there isn't. Then is there a rule that says one can't look at it? This there isn't. That's right. I think there is a rule in the sect that encourages the inner disciples to look at the show monument more often. It is said that the show monument hides the secret of our lingering fragrance cult. However, for thousands of years, no disciple has been able to find any clues. Of course, there is nothing wrong with the disciples being respectful to the show monument. However, Junior Brother Ren was curious and wanted to look at the show monument to find out some secrets. This is offending the show monument? This? Senior Marshal Brother Wei's face was covered in sweat. There was a rule in the lingering fragrance peak that encouraged the disciples to look at the show monument. However, after thousands of years, no one had been able to find anything. Gradually, the show monument became the object of worship. Gradually, people forgot the original purpose of the show monument and only worshipped it. When Senior Marshal Brother Wei saw Zhang Xiaohua touch the show monument with his hands, he naturally thought that he was blaspheming the show monument and had forgotten the previous rule. Now that he heard Zhang Xiaohua mention it, he couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. That's right. Senior Marshal Sister Zhang is right. I have heard of this legend when I was at the Pill Hall. I have always wanted to see what secrets there are on the show monument. Therefore, when I arrived at the foot of the mountain, I couldn't help but try to understand it. Zhang Xiaohua immediately changed his words with a smile. But, Senior Marshal Brother Wei said angrily, since he has the waste token on him, why is he still blocked by the mountain's protective array? Zhang Xiaohua pretended to scratch his head and said innocently, This? I don't know. But, didn't you see that I am also here? Didn't the array you were talking about fail to block me? Zhang Pinger was taken aback and said curiously, Junior Brother Ren's waste token was given to me by my master. It has a 10-day time limit and will only expire after midnight. There shouldn't be such a problem now. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and Zhang Xiaohua quickly passed the waste token to him. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, Zhang Pinger looked at the waste token and said in bewilderment, That's right. This is the waste token. There shouldn't be a problem. Then, she raised her head and looked at the David's deer outside the mountain path. She smiled and asked, Junior Brother Ren, is that your mount? It's actually a David's deer. That's right. Senior Marshal Sister Zhang, I obtained it by chance. Yes. Junior Brother Ren, take this waste token and go out. Bring the David's deer in and let me see if there is a problem with this waste token. Of course, there was no problem with the waste token. After Zhang Xiaohua took the waste token, she smoothly passed through the protective array and brought Huan Huan to the mountain path. Senior Marshal Brother Wei was puzzled when he saw Zhang Xiaohua entering and exiting the mountain without any reaction. How is it? Junior Marshal Brother Wei, is there a problem with my Junior Marshal Brother's waste token? Senior Marshal Brother Wei was a little embarrassed. He cupped his hands and said, This is my duty. Senior Marshal Sister Zhang, please forgive me. However, although this waste token is correct, Junior Brother Ren was indeed blocked by the array the first time. I still have to report this matter to the higher-ups. I hope Senior Marshal Sister Zhang can understand. Zhang Pinger pondered for a moment and said, That's up to you. I can't make the decision for you. If you want to report it, report it. Then, she nodded at Zhang Xiaohua and said, Follow me, Junior Brother Ren. My master is still waiting in the hall. After she finished speaking, she ignored Senior Marshal Brother Wei and the others and walked forward with her head raised. Zhang Xiaohua smiled apologetically at Senior Marshal Brother Wei and the others. She bowed and led the David's deer and followed. After walking for a while and seeing that there was no one else around, Zhang Pinger said shyly, "Senior Marshal Brother, it's been hard on you. You have to be my junior marshal brother in this Lingxiang Peak." "Haha, junior marshal sister." Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, "It's okay. It's okay. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. I'm already used to being called junior marshal brother." Hearing Zhang Xiaohua call her junior marshal sister without hesitation, Zhang Pinger felt sweet in her heart. She smiled and said, "The time I spent at Shixin Peak was short, so I didn't have the chance to tell Senior Marshal Brother in detail. I don't know if Senior Marshal Brother will be satisfied with transferring Senior Marshal Brother to our Lihua Hall. On the way out of Yulan Dusk, I heard from Junior Marshal Brother Liu that Senior Marshal Brother wants to enter Wuming Hall and become an outer disciple. However, there are many disciples participating in the outer disciple test." "Oh, Senior Marshal Brother. I'm not saying that Senior Marshal Brother's martial arts are not good enough. I just feel that since you want to become an outer disciple, then it's better to become an inner disciple in our Lihua Hall. So, I didn't discuss it with you, nor didn't get your consent. I just asked Master to ask for a decree in front of the sect leader to transfer you to the inner disciple as an alchemy disciple. Oh, also, Senior Marshal Brother, this inner sect alchemy disciple also has various tests. It can't be done with just one sentence. So, Master can only ask for a position as a preparatory disciple for you. As long as you pass the specific test, you can become an official alchemy disciple. Senior Marshal Brother, your martial arts are so outstanding. I think you can definitely pass these so-called tests. So, I ask for Senior Marshal Brother's understanding. This is only a preparatory alchemy disciple." Seeing that Zhang Pinger's white face was somewhat flushed because of her anxious explanation, Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "Look at you, junior martial sister. Why are you being so polite with me? To be able to skip the outer disciple and directly become an inner disciple at Lingxiang Peak, I didn't even dream of it. I can't thank you enough. How can I blame you?" "That's good. As long as Senior Marshal Brother can understand, I'm very gratified," Zhang Pinger said shyly. "But, Junior Marshal Sister, do you think I can definitely come out of Yulong Grand Canyon?" Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously. "Not only is Senior Marshal Brother's martial arts outstanding, your character is even more outstanding. How can a person like you be buried in Yulong Grand Canyon? Even the heavens wouldn't be willing to let such a thing happen." Hee. Hearing Zhang Pinger praise his character, Zhang Xiaohua laughed foolishly. Wasn't this the character he was bragging about? "That's right." Zhang Xiaohua patted his forehead and asked with concern, "Look at my brain. Junior Marshal Sister, your master's condition." Zhang Pinger was beaming with joy and said with a smile, "Thanks to Senior Marshal Brothers Yuan returning grass and Marshal Uncle's excellent pills, Master has already recovered." Hee. That's good. That's good." Zhang Xiaohua congratulated with a smile. Soon after, his eyes turned and asked again, "It's just that. Have you used up all of the Yuan returning grass?" This, Zhang Pinger didn't understand and said, I don't know. I don't know why Senior Marshal Brother is asking this." "It's nothing." Zhang Xiaohua put on a thrifty appearance and said, "If there are any leftover Yuan returning grass, Junior Marshal Sister will advise your Marshal Uncle to return it to its original owner. How about it?" -4. Chapter 833. This, hearing Zhang Xiaohua's request for the origin returning grass, Zhang Pinger was in a difficult position. The origin returning grass was an extremely rare item that had not been seen in Lingering Fragrance Peak for hundreds of years. Since she had already given it to her martial uncle, how could she ask for it back? Furthermore, her martial uncle had used the origin returning grass to refine the elixir to save her master. She owed him a favor, so Zhang Pinger did not have the slightest intention of asking for the origin returning grass. However, after hearing Zhang Xiaohua's question, she could not help but feel a little awkward. Speaking from the root, The origin returning grass belonged to Zhang Xiaohua. He gave it to her to save her master. If she could not finish using it, returning the rest to Zhang Xiaohua was only right. However, but how could Zhang Ping'er ask her martial uncle for this? After thinking for a while, Zhang Ping'er clenched her teeth and forced a smile. Since senior brother still needs the origin returning grass, I will ask martial uncle in a few days to see if there is any left. However, if I can't get it, please don't blame me. Although Zhang Xiaohua mentioned the origin returning grass, it was out of instinct. Now that he heard it, he looked up at the scenery of lingering fragrance peak under the setting sun and waved his hand. It's fine. Since junior sister is in a difficult position, then don't. I was just saying. After saying that, he looked left and right again and followed behind Zhang Ping'er along the very spacious mountain path. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua like this, Zhang Ping'er thought that Zhang Xiaohua was unhappy. She felt uneasy and thought about how to ask her martial uncle. For a moment, the two of them did not have anything to say. After walking for a while, there was a fork in the mountain path. There were two paths to the left and right. Zhang Ping'er did not say anything and turned to walk towards the left mountain path. Zhang Xiaohua followed behind and also turned a corner. He looked at the short distance they had walked from the foot of the mountain and then looked up at lingering fragrance peak. He coughed and asked, "That, junior sister." "Oh, senior brother. What's the matter?" Zhang Ping'er turned around and asked, "Junior sister, what's on your mind?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "Oh, it's nothing." "Then, where are we going?" It seems to be quite far from the mountainside." Zhang Xiaohua pointed upwards and asked, "Halfway up the mountain?" Zhang Ping'er didn't understand what Zhang Xiaohua meant and asked curiously, "Why would senior martial brother want to go halfway up the mountain? That's a place like the Greenwood Palace." "Ruijin Palace? Don't tell me we don't live on the mountainside?" Zhang Xiaohua knew that there were some discrepancies and said awkwardly, "Disciples of Tianmu Peak, Bayou Peak, and Shershin Peak of Misty Hall all live on the mountainside. So, haha, senior brother, I understand." Zhang Ping'er smiled and explained, "The inner sect disciples of the lingering fragrance peak are different from the other outer sect disciples." "Oh, speaking of the outer sect does not refer to the Wuming Hall's disciples. Hee. In fact, in the eyes of us inner sect disciples, whether it is the Wuming Hall, Pill Expansion Hall, Shuyu Hall, etc., they are all outer sect disciples. What senior martial brother said earlier about turning the Wuming Hall's disciples into outer sect disciples is just a way for the Wuming Hall's disciples to flatter themselves." Zhang Xiaohua was amused when he heard this. Of course, the Wuming Hall's disciples relied on their superior martial arts to distinguish themselves from the ordinary disciples and called themselves outer sect disciples, which corresponded with the title of inner sect disciples to highlight their different identities. But they didn't know that the inner sect disciples didn't make any special distinction between the Wuming Hall's disciples. As Zhang Ping'er said, the Wuming Hall's disciples were flattering themselves. Then, can all the ordinary disciples be like me and become inner sect disciples? Zhang Xiaohua suddenly asked. Zhang Ping'er felt helpless for Zhang Xiaohua's ignorance and had to smile. "Senior martial brother, your idea is wrong. Inner sect disciples prioritize martial arts and are specially trained since childhood. How can the ordinary disciples of the lingering fragrance cult have this condition? Normally, only the Wuming Hall can be selected to become inner sect disciples." In that case, I have to thank junior martial sister for your guidance. "You're welcome. With senior martial brother's martial arts, entering Wuming Hall and entering inner sect is just a piece of cake for you. I'm just using a trick. Besides, senior martial brother is just a preparatory alchemy disciple. First, you have to pass the martial arts test. Second, you're just an alchemy disciple. Well, you're a disciple of our distant fire hall. I think. Isn't this different from senior martial brother's original intention? I hope senior martial brother doesn't blame me for being presumptuous." Zhang Ping'er lowered her head slightly as she spoke. Even her voice was soft. Zhang Xiaohua now understood why Zhang Ping'er kept asking her not to blame her for being presumptuous. So she laughed and said, "Look at what you're saying. Didn't I just answer you? Junior martial sister gave me this opportunity to let you enter inner sect. I'm already very grateful." Why should I blame Junior Marshall's sister? Zhang Ping'er was relieved. She stretched her white neck and raised her head. She smiled and said, in that case, Junior Marshall's sister is relieved. Then she patted her forehead and smiled charmingly. Look at me. I'm explaining to Senior Marshall brother about the distant fire hall. How did I get so far off track? Then she pointed to the top of the mountain and said, Lingering Fragrance Peak is different from other outer sect peaks. All the inner sect disciples don't live together. They don't live halfway up the mountain. The inner sect disciples are divided according to Ruijin Hall, Distant Fire Hall, Greenwood Hall, and so on. They live in different areas from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain. Our Distant Fire Hall is responsible for medicinal herbs and alchemy. We live in the lowest level of Lingering Fragrance Peak. Moreover, if the disciples of each hall are not on official business, they can't go to other areas casually. If Senior Marshall brother wants to go to the Greenwood Hall, I'm afraid you can't. After all, the disciples of Ruijin Hall are guarding the mountain paths of each area. Without official business tokens, no one can go out. So it's like this. Zhang Xiaohua was a little surprised. In that case, the inner sect disciples don't have as much freedom as the ordinary disciples? Haha. Zhang Ping'er smiled sweetly. How can that be? If you ordinary disciples don't have anything to do, you also can't leave your own mountain. As for our mythical flame hall, although we are only at the foot of the Lingering Fragrance Peak, the area at the foot of the mountain is larger than the entire White U Peak. We are free and unfettered here. Why would we go to other areas for no reason? But Zhang Xiaohua hesitated for a moment and asked, Didn't I see Junior Marshall's sister easily reach the foot of the mountain just now? This. Zhang Ping'er's white face flushed red. She thought, this guy, I was worried about you. That's why I secretly came to take a look. You made me make such a mistake, and you still have the nerve to ask me? However, she still whispered, Our Distant Fire Hall is the closest to the foot of the mountain. Occasionally, there will be disciples who come here to take a breather. The Ruijin Hall's disciples usually don't care about them. As long as they don't rashly pass through the peak protection array, it will be fine as long as they don't go to Lingering Fragrance Peak. At this point, Zhang Xiaohua vaguely understood Zhang Ping'er's meaning. His heart moved. When he thought of Zhang Ping'er's nervousness, he couldn't help but look at Zhang Ping'er's beautiful face. His heart felt warm. Zhang Ping'er felt Zhang Xiaohua's gaze on her. She raised her head and met his gaze. Then, she immediately looked away. She was like a frightened rabbit, her eyes flickering. Oh, that's right. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something and immediately asked, Envoy Mu, who came with you? Where does she stay? Envoy Mu? Zhang Ping'er was taken aback. She looked at Zhang Xiaohua in astonishment. She didn't understand why Zhang Xiaohua would ask about Envoy Mu. However, she immediately replied, Envoy Mu is an inner court disciple of Emotian Palace. Naturally, she stays at the peak of Lingering Fragrance Peak. Peak? Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and said, The mountain wind there must be quite strong, right? Puffed. Zhang Ping'er laughed and said, Senior brother must be joking. Emotian Palace might be at the peak of the mountain, but the peak of Lingering Fragrance Peak is flat. Not only does Emotian Palace cover the entire peak, even Envoy Mu's residence isn't the peak that Senior brother mentioned. From the waist up, it should be the area where Emotian Palace's disciples reside. How can there be an endless mountain wind? Zhang Xiaohua smiled. He rubbed his nose and said, That's good. I have seen their Vice Hall Master at Serene Peak. He is fair and tender, but his face is a little red. If it isn't because of the mountain wind, what else could it be? That's why I asked. Ha ha ha. At this time, Zhang Ping'er was laughing like a flower. She almost couldn't straighten her back. After a long while, she finally managed to stop. She gasped for breath and said, I didn't expect Senior brother to be so humorous. I haven't seen it before in Yulong Grand Canyon. Haha, I heard that the Vice Hall Masters of Misty Palace are all male disciples of Emotian Palace. Although they also live in the area of Emotian Palace, they are very far from Envoy Mu and the others. They are also very far from the peak of the mountain. How can they be damaged by the mountain wind? Senior brother, don't laugh at other people's shortcomings. Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said, It's just my personal opinion. Don't believe it. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua waving his hand, Zhang Ping'er couldn't help but laugh again. At this time, they suddenly heard someone in front of them scolding. Is that a disciple of distant fire palace? Who is laughing so loudly? Don't you know the rules of the palace? When Zhang Ping'er heard this, her expression changed drastically. She forcefully suppressed her laughter and threw a glance at Zhang Xiaohua. Then, she said in a clear voice, "Third senior sister, it's junior sister here. Zhang Ping'er, why are you here at this time?" Following the questioning voice, a woman dressed in palace attire came out from a mountain path that was covered by mountain rocks. That woman was dressed in a gorgeous palace attire. Her beautiful face and watery eyes stared sternly at Zhang Ping'er. Then, she turned her gaze to Zhang Xiaohua and asked curiously, "Who is this?" Zhang Ping'er took a step forward and said with a smile, reporting to third senior sister, "This is our distant fire palace's new preparatory disciple. He is..." Before Zhang Ping'er could finish, the third senior sister waved her hand and said coldly, "Don't say any more. You have been busy for the past few months. Isn't it because of some preparatory disciple? How can I not know?" Then, she sized up Zhang Xiaohua a few times and mocked. "I thought he was someone more handsome than Panin, but he looks so ordinary. I don't know how he moved junior sister. -4. Chapter 834. When Zhang Xiaohua heard the third senior sister's sarcastic tone, she felt unhappy. She glanced at her and was about to speak when Zhang Ping'er hurriedly said, "Senior sister, look at what you're saying. Junior brother Ren picked the origin returning grass and gave it to me for free. That was how I cured master's illness. Tell me, if I don't repay him, wouldn't I be worse than a dog? Senior sister should know about this matter as well. Why are you saying such harsh words today? Who knows if this origin returning grass was picked by your so-called junior brother Ren or by you? You want to let an ordinary disciple who you're familiar with jump over the dragon gate and become an inner disciple. TSK, even I, as your senior sister, am envious of you." Senior sister. Zhang Ping'er looked at Zhang Xiaohua and rebuked her. She was in a difficult position. "You also know that I'm your senior sister?" The third senior sister sneered and said, "Then why don't you listen to what I say?" As soon as the third senior sister finished speaking, the sound of clapping could be heard. Zhang Ping'er and the third senior sister were stunned. When they turned their heads, they saw Zhang Xiaohua clapping with both of her hands raised. "You scoundrel! What right do you have to speak here? Wait at the side. This senior sister is in a bad mood today. I'll teach you a lesson later." The third senior sister sneered. What a strong killing intent. How awe-inspiring. However, Zhang Xiaohua praised. She then patted Huan Huan's protruding horn and said, "What a pity. You were born with a good appearance, but you're just an idiot. You can't even compare to my Huan Huan." When Huan Huan heard this, it dug its hooves on the ground and neighed in excitement. You, give me your life." The third senior sister was enraged. She stomped her foot and floated forward. She stretched out her jade-like hand and gently patted Zhang Xiaohua's forehead. "Senior sister." Seeing this, Zhang Ping'er moved with the flow. She stood in front of Zhang Xiaohua and raised her palm to hit her third senior sister's palm. Both of their palms emitted internal energy, and a pong sound was heard. Third senior sister took a few steps back while Zhang Ping'er crashed into Zhang Xiaohua's arms. How could Zhang Xiaohua dare to let Zhang Ping'er into her arms? He stretched out his hand and pressed it against her back, dispelling the force of her retreat. Then, he said, Senior sister Zhang, what is your third senior sister doing?" Then, he slapped his forehead and said, "Could it be because of what I said just now? There are really all kinds of people in this world. Look, what can't she find? She even wants to be scolded? I just thought of a shrew in the past and said it out of emotion. It's not targeted at you, third senior sister. Why is she so angry? I thought that the senior sister of Lingering Fragrance Peak would be as elegant and graceful as senior sister Zhang. But," he shook his head again and said, "this really disappoints me. The inner court disciples are really getting worse with each generation. The third senior sister flew into a rage when she heard that. She stomped her foot and wanted to rush over. Zhang Ping'er quickly glared at Zhang Xiaohua and said, Junior brother Rin, what are you saying? Since you didn't say it to my third senior sister, hurry up and make it clear. Don't let her misunderstand. Otherwise, do you still want to be an inner court disciple? Then, she stood in front of Zhang Xiaohua and explained to her third senior sister, Senior sister, it's all a misunderstanding. Look, junior brother Ren said that he wasn't talking about you. You. Seeing Zhang Pinger standing in front of her again, the third senior sister gritted her teeth and said, You bitch. How dare you gang up with outsiders to bully your senior sister? Don't think that I can't do anything to you just because you are favored by master. Today, after thinking for a while, she pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, This scoundrel dared to offend his superior and offend my senior sister. Today, if this scoundrel doesn't kneel down and apologize to me, I won't let him off. Hearing the third senior sister calling her a scoundrel again and again, Zhang Xiaohua was also angry. She sneered and said, Senior sister, you are wrong. I am a preparatory alchemy disciple of the distant fire hall. As long as the word preparatory is not removed, even if I am not a disciple of the distant fire hall, how can you say that I offended my superior? When the third senior sister heard it, she was so angry that she stammered. You. For a long time, she couldn't say anything. Then, she rolled her eyes and said, You are a disciple of the pill expanding hall. When an outer court disciple sees an inner court disciple, he has to call her senior sister. Don't tell me that you are not offending your superior. When Zhang Xiaohua heard it, she smiled and shrugged. She spread out her hands and said with a look of regret, Sigh, yes, if I am still a disciple of the pill expanding hall, then this so-called senior sister's statement is naturally offending my superior. Unfortunately, since 10 days ago, when Envoy Mu passed on the sect leader's decree, I am no longer a disciple of the pill expanding hall. Since I am no longer a disciple of the pill expanding hall, then senior sister's statement, cough cough, naturally is not valid. You. When the third senior sister heard Zhang Xiaohua's fallacy, she didn't know how to refute. She pointed at Zhang Xiaohua with a trembling hand. Zhang Xiaohua looked at her innocently and curiously and suddenly said, That, third senior sister, the weather is a little cold and the wind is strong here. Look at you. Why don't you take care of your body? Your hand is trembling. Why don't you put on more clothes? Oh, right, I have some clothes here to keep out the cold. Why don't I lend it to senior sister first? After he finished speaking, he turned around to take the bag from the David's deer. Zhang Pinger, who had been holding back her laughter for a long time, couldn't hold it in anymore. Her pale face turned red and she laughed out loud. However, after she laughed out loud, she realized that it was wrong. She covered her mouth with her hand and said with difficulty, Third, senior sister, don't listen to junior brothers, nonsense. The third senior sister's face turned pale. She looked at how Zhang Pinger protected Zhang Xiaohua and how Zhang Xiaohua turned around to take the bag. She really couldn't imagine what kind of nonsense Zhang Xiaohua would say if she took out the clothes. She gritted her teeth and stomped her foot, saying angrily, Zhang Pinger, Ran, just you wait. After she finished speaking, she turned around and used her qing gong to dash into the forest at the side. After a few ups and downs, she disappeared without a trace. Zhang Xiaohua already knew what was going on, but she pretended not to know. She turned around and asked, That, third senior sister, what size are you? Why did you disappear? Could it be that you went back to take your clothes? Haha. Zhang Pinger laughed and said, Senior brother Renyu? You are really, however. She couldn't say what it was really. After a long while, Zhang Pinger stopped laughing and said with an uneasy expression, Senior brother, although you taught third senior sister a lesson just now and it was satisfying, you offended her quite badly. You still have to stay in the fire palace in the future. Sigh, you have to think of a way. Zhang Xiaohua didn't care at all. What did she say just now? Didn't she already prepare it for you? This kind of thing will happen sooner or later. Why are you afraid of her? Zhang Pinger was still worried. I'm not afraid of her, but third senior sister has some reputation in the fire palace. If she deliberately finds trouble with you, third senior sister is in charge of the distribution of the medicinal garden. She won't cause trouble for you. Nonsense. Do you even need to say it? She definitely will. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, who knows, she might even cause trouble for me during the assessment from the preparatory disciple to the official disciple. Zhang Pinger shook her head and said, that won't happen. The preparatory disciple assessment is mainly a test of martial arts. With senior brother's martial arts, it will be a piece of cake. Furthermore, the assessment of the disciples in the Fire Palace is mostly managed by first senior sister. Third senior sister doesn't have the opportunity to interfere. Oh, right. Your third senior sister said that you didn't take her words to heart. Then what is it? Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously. This. Zhang Pinger's face turned red and she was very hesitant. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't help but think of the guy called Yu Zhuochuan that she met on the way here. She thought to herself, could it be this refined prodigal thing? Hence, she hurriedly waved her hand and said, if it's inconvenient, don't say it. Zhang Pinger heaved a sigh of relief and said, thank you, senior brother, for your understanding. Then, Zhang Pinger led Zhang Xiaohua through the mountain path. In front of them was a beautiful group of palaces. It was located between the mountain rocks and the forest. It was extremely beautiful. Zhang Xiaohua pointed at the beautiful scenery in front of her and said in astonishment, junior sister, this is the Fire Palace you mentioned? Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's astonished expression, Zhang Pinger was very satisfied and said, that's right. Senior brother, are you satisfied? Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his hands and said, satisfied, extremely satisfied. Junior sister, you have said this many times. In the future, don't ask me again. I am extremely satisfied with your arrangements. There is not the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. Really? Zhang Pinger glanced at him and said in a somewhat coquettish manner, since that is the case, why didn't senior brother come earlier? You made me worried for a long time. I thought that senior brother didn't want to come. As her voice fell, her face turned slightly red again and she secretly said, senior brother? He wouldn't. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, his face also turned red. He said red because he felt guilty. Didn't he take a detour to Floating Hill Peak and delay it for a few days? If not for being greedy, wouldn't he have come to Lingering Fragrance Peak long ago? Therefore, he muttered, there are still some matters to be handed over at Serene Peak. The disciples on duty at Pill Expansion Hall, cough cough, they came a little late. His voice became softer and softer. Sigh, it was inevitable to feel guilty when some lies were said. Zhang Pinger didn't suspect him and said happily, isn't that so? Senior brother said so. I was overthinking. How could I forget that senior brother was on duty at Serene Peak? If there were no disciples to replace you, it would be really difficult for you to get away. Senior brother's way of doing things makes me really admire you. This. Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and said helplessly, it's just us. Junior sister, senior brother still has many good points. You will slowly discover them. Don't mention it again. -4. Chapter 835. As they got closer to Lihua Hall, the mountain path changed from green stone to solid wooden planks. Behind them was a corridor built along the mountain. The corridor was engraved with exquisite drawings. Not only were there flowers, birds, fish, and insects, there were also many people's stories. Most of them were engraved with unknown patterns. These patterns did not seem to have any pattern at first glance, like graffiti. However, if one looked closely, there was a pattern within it. But if one paid attention, they would not be able to see anything. Zhang Xiaohua walked along the corridor and used her divine sense to scan it. The patterns on the corridor were similar to the ones on the stone tablet, but there was a slight difference. It seemed to be a restriction, but there was no fluctuation of yuan qi. It was probably used in the early days of the immortal Tao. Now, it was abandoned and could only be used as a corridor. As they walked along the corridor, they met many disciples. There were both male and female disciples. They were all staring curiously at Zhang Xiaohua and the four odd beasts, causing Zhang Pinger's face to turn red. The disciples were all polite and did not ask much. Even if Zhang Pinger wanted to explain, she could not find an excuse. She was abnormally embarrassed. AI, why do you have to do this? Zhang Xiaohua could see clearly from behind. Although she was also a little uncomfortable, she was able to deal with it on the surface. She could only sigh in her heart. After walking for a while, Zhang Ping'er suddenly thought of something. She turned back and said, "Senior, I know that your martial arts are strong, but in lingering fragrance peak, martial arts are nothing. No matter how strong our Lihua Hall disciples are, they may not be able to compete with the disciples of Emo Xiangong." So, Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, "So what?" Zhang Ping'er smiled bitterly and said, "So, if there is nothing that I cannot control, I hope that Senior will be merciful. After all, this is lingering fragrance peak. The rules must be carefully followed." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua remembered the first, second, and third rules of the fragrant religion. He smiled and said, "Of course, this senior brother has always been one who doesn't offend others if they don't offend me. As long as I don't bully others like your third senior sister today, I'll just give in." Zhang Ping'er was overjoyed. Just as she was about to speak, a bell-like laughter came from the side corridor. "Junior sister, you're finally back. Hee, can you catch your lovely person?" Following the laughter, a light green figure flew over from the side. When it landed on the ground, Zhang Xiaohua saw that it was a female disciple about the same age as Zhang Ping'er. She also had delicate features. Sixth senior sister. Zhang Ping'er was greatly embarrassed. She pulled the woman's sleeve and said, "What are you talking about?" Her words were similar to what she said to the third senior sister, but her tone was much more intimate. There wasn't much reproach, but more of shyness. The sixth senior sister didn't reply. Her two big eyes sized up Zhang Xiaohua, and she said in disappointment, "Junior sister's eyesight is not good." However, he immediately changed his tone. Although his appearance is extremely ordinary, his ability to remain calm is top-notch. Which of the ordinary male disciples that I've seen didn't go up to him to flatter him or be a yes-man? This Ren, whatever, actually, TSK, doesn't even greet her? Zhang Ping'er heard this and quickly said, "Junior brother Ren, this is my sixth senior sister. Her name is Shui Linglong. Come over and greet her." Then she said to Shui Linglong, "Sixth senior sister, this is the junior brother Ren that I told you before. His name is Ren Xiaoyao. His martial arts are very powerful. Even the disciples of Wuming Hall may not be his opponent. The returning yuan grass that was used to save Master was picked by him." Shui Linglong smiled and said, "You have told me this many times. I can even recite it. No need to say it again." Zhang Ping'er's face became redder. Zhang Xiaohua stepped forward and cupped his hands and said, "I am Ren Xiaoyao. Greetings, senior sister Shui." Shui Linglong smiled and returned the greeting. She didn't seem to treat him as an ordinary disciple and said, "No need to be so polite. From now on, we will be disciples of the same hall. I heard from Ping'er that your martial arts are very good. In the future, you will have to take care of us." Zhang Xiaohua was very modest. "Senior sister Shui is too polite. I am just an ordinary outer disciple. How can I be compared to senior sister Shui? I still need senior sister Shui's good guidance." Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's neither haughty nor humble attitude, Shui Linglong was even more pleased. She said with a smile, "No wonder 7th junior sister has been talking about you. She said that you are the one and only person in Zhuanxiang cult. Now it seems that you really have some skills. If you really have some skills, then we can rest assured." Sixth senior sister, Zhang Ping'er gently pulled Shui Linglong's sleeve and said, "Junior brother Ren, just a moment ago, I met third senior sister on the mountain path." Then she told Shui Linglong about her encounter with third senior sister. Shui Linglong's face was full of amazement. Her eyes were filled with a strange light. She kept looking at Zhang Xiaohua. There were several times when she was like Zhang Ping'er. She laughed until she bent over. Finally, she said, "Ren Xiaoyao, you are really talented, but you have offended third senior sister. You will suffer in the future." Zhang Ping'er smiled apologetically and said, "That's right. Otherwise, why would I drag sixth senior martial sister along? You have to stand up for younger sister." Third senior martial sister spoke ill of junior martial brother Ren as soon as they met. Don't worry. The more I look at your junior brother Ren, the more I like him. In a moment, I will look for second senior sister and talk to her." Although third senior sister is most afraid of eldest senior sister has always been fair. She may not be biased towards junior brother Ren. As long as second senior sister is willing to listen to her, who would be afraid of Mei Suiying? Zhang Ping'er was overjoyed. She said with a smile, I know that sixth senior sister is the most intimate with me. You can go now. Don't let third senior sister complain first. You little girl. Shui Linglong was speechless. I just said a few words, and you are already chasing me away. How can I follow you? Zhang Ping'er pretended to be angry and said, Then senior sister should come with us to see master. You have nothing to do anyway. I don't want to do that. Right now, second senior sister should still be in Su Garden. I will go and take a look. After saying that, Shui Linglong smiled mysteriously and quickly walked away. This action made Zhang Ping'er's face turn red again. Zhang Ping'er really didn't understand. Usually, she treated people and matters with a cold attitude. She didn't even say anything to male disciples. She was almost called the cold beauty among the disciples. However, she didn't know why, but today, her face turned red so easily. Her mood swings were also unprecedented. Zhang Ping'er looked at Zhang Xiaohua somewhat bashfully. She covered it up and said, Second senior sister likes to tease people the most. Master, senior brother Ren, don't blame her. Zhang Xiaohua stopped pretending to look at the decorative patterns on the corridor. She touched her nose and said, Your senior sisters are all very interesting. Hee, very interesting. Soon after, she said with a smile, I heard senior sister Shui call you seventh junior sister. Do you have any junior sisters younger than you? Of course not. Master only accepted us seven sisters. He said that he couldn't stand it anymore and didn't want to accept any more disciples. How can there be any younger ones? Strange. Then they should call you little junior sister. Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat speechless and tried to find a topic to talk about. Who knows? I guess this seventh junior sister sounds nice. When it came to other things, Zhang Ping'er spoke in a relaxed manner. She didn't have that restraint. It was as if Zhang Xiaohua was the host and she was just a guest. They walked along the corridor for a long time and turned several rugged bends. After Zhang Xiaohua was completely lost, the two of them arrived in front of a simple but elegant pavilion. This pavilion was surrounded by water and was built on top of a lake. If it was on flat ground, it wouldn't be strange. However, this was Lingxiang Peak. On top of a mountain, Zhang Xiaohua could only click her tongue in wonder. The two of them came to the side of the lake. Before they could get on the floating bridge above the lake, they heard a slightly old voice from inside. Ping'er, why are you here alone? Counting the days, today is the day that your junior brother comes. Could it be that he doesn't want to come? Zhang Ping'er was shocked and turned around to look at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was also taken aback. She floated up and landed on the ground with a pa sound. She asked softly, Senior sister Zhang, how should I address your master? Zhang Ping'er's face turned red for no reason. Of course, she should have said this earlier. But I know your limits. Where did you run off to? Zhang Ping'er replied softly, Call him Deputy Hall Master. You are not a disciple of the distant Flame Hall and I don't know how to address you. Deputy Hall Master? Zhang Xiaohua's mind suddenly thought of the jade artifact shop in Lu Town's Four Trees. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and said, Disciple Ren Xiaoyao greets Deputy Hall Master. I sprained my ankle on the way here, and it wasn't easy for me to walk on Lingxiang Peak. That was why I rode on a mount. It was really rude of me. I deserve to die. After she finished speaking, she stomped her feet on the ground to show her presence. Zhang Ping'er was so shocked that she was speechless. She knew that Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts were high, but it shouldn't be to this extent. Although Zhang Ping'er wasn't very clear about her master's martial arts, she knew that he was still the Deputy Hall Master of the distant Flame Hall. Just based on this title alone, how could he not have exceptional martial arts? And her master actually didn't hear Zhang Xiaohua's footsteps. Seeing that Zhang Ping'er was in a daze, Zhang Xiaohua tugged on her sleeve and pouted her lips. Zhang Ping'er then regained her senses and said in a panic, Yes, master. Junior brother and he is indeed feeling unwell. So, The voice sounded again. This lass, no matter what, Ren Xiaoyao is my savior. How can I blame him? Haha, Ren Xiaoyao, come in with Ping Er. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he was also very happy. With just these few words, he immediately built an amiable image of the Vice Palace Master in his heart. Therefore, he respectfully said, "Thank you for waiting, Vice Palace Master." Zhang Ping'er was also relieved. She smiled and glanced at Zhang Xiaohua before leading the way. They walked along the pontoon bridge and arrived in front of the pavilion. Zhang Xiaohua also left the four odd beasts at the side and followed behind Zhang Ping'er like a normal person. However, before he reached the pavilion, he heard Zhang Ping'er's master say with a smile, "Ren Xiaoyao, your qinggong is not bad." Zhang Xiaohua frowned. Where did this come from? There are more chapters. -4. Chapter 836. There weren't any decorations in the pavilion. It was just empty. A woman with white hair and a veil on her face was sitting cross-legged at the very top. Zhang Ping'er led Zhang Xiaohua in carefully. When they were some distance away from the woman, they stopped and saluted. "Greetings, master." Zhang Xiaohua was naturally respectful. He cupped his hands and saluted. "Greetings, Deputy Palace Master." The woman waved her hand. She still had a pleasant expression. "I don't have any tables or chairs here. Just sit down. Don't stand on ceremony." She said, "Don't stand on ceremony." But Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be impolite. He still thanked her and respectfully sat down cross-legged not far away. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua usually meditated and cultivated. He wasn't unfamiliar with this position. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua sitting down so skillfully, the woman seemed surprised. She couldn't help but ask, "Ren Xiaoyao, what kind of internal energy do you practice?" Zhang Xiaohua opened his mouth and said, "Deputy Palace Master, I practice the reckless bull strength." Reckless bull strength? The woman was obviously surprised. She muttered, "It doesn't seem to be a famous martial art in Jianghu." Hee. Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "That's right. I don't have enough talent. I can only choose to practice the most basic martial arts. Even in Jianghu, the reckless bull strength is an extremely basic martial art. It's normal that Deputy Palace Master hasn't heard of it." "So it's like that." The woman said suspiciously, "You look quite young. This reckless bull strength is also an extremely basic martial art. But how can your martial arts be so high? Even Ping'er isn't your opponent?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Senior Sister Zhang is overpraising me. This little one has never fought with Senior Sister Zhang. It was just a coincidence that I was able to help her a few times. When it comes to martial arts, this little one may not be a match for Senior Sister Zhang." Zhang Ping'er didn't know what Zhang Xiaohua meant. She looked at him and then at her master. She wanted to say something but stopped. The woman was very satisfied with Zhang Xiaohua's modesty. "I didn't expect you to be so self-aware and refuse to take credit for yourself. It's really rare. However, at your age, you should be full of youthful vigor and strive for superiority. Not revealing your edge like this, blindly hiding your incompetence, may not be a good thing." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Thank you for your guidance, Deputy Palace Master." Actually, from the sound of your footsteps when you came in, I could tell that your qinggong is very good. You must also have some attainments in inner strength. I just feel that you are young and a little strange, so I said a few more words. Don't blame me." Zhang Xiaohua liked it even more. She also said respectfully, "Vice Palace Master is my elder. I naturally have to listen with all my ears. It's nothing." Speaking of elders, I am indeed older than you. However, my life was saved by you. I asked Ping-er to bring you here because I wanted to personally thank you." As she said that, she stood up and bowed. "What?" Zhang Xiaohua was immediately shocked. This was the Deputy Palace Master of the distant Fire Temple. Yes, although she didn't understand the trick, to be the Palace Master of the Lingering Fragrance Peak, that was at least on the same level as Yang Ruping and Elder Zishan. She actually bowed to an ordinary disciple like herself. This was simply inconceivable. Zhang Xiaohua also immediately stood up and bowed deeply. She returned the greeting and said, "Deputy Palace Master, you scared me to death. If I had heard Senior Sister Zhang's words earlier, I wouldn't have dared to come. Ha ha ha. The woman also laughed. She straightened her back and said, You are really interesting. I naturally have to thank you in person for saving my life. Otherwise, wouldn't I be an ungrateful person? For a moment, Zhang Xiaohua's impression of the spreading fragrance cult weakened a little. Since there was such a grateful person in the cult, even if they were despicable, how dark could they be? Zhang Xiaohua also straightened her back. It's all because of senior sister Zhang's filial piety that moved heaven and earth. I just happened to be at the right time and conveniently took away the gift bestowed to senior sister Zhang. It's fine if Deputy Palace Master doesn't pursue the crime of taking it for myself. How would I dare to be greedy for this credit? Yes, fortunately. If you hadn't given this gift to Ping in time, I would have turned into a malicious spirit and come to you for revenge. The woman also laughed. This, Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, It seems like Palace Master's idea is going to fall through. With such a filial disciple like senior sister Zhang, you will have to wait 1,000 years before you can find me. Ha ha ha. The woman laughed very happily. Even Zhang Pinger, who was sitting next to her, was secretly laughing. After a long while, the Deputy Palace Master stopped laughing and said, It's been a long time since I've seen such an interesting little fellow like you. No wonder Ping has been nagging in my ear, saying something about repaying kindness. Hee hee, at first I thought Ping had some selfish motives. Now it seems that if she didn't have such selfish motives, I would have only taken a martial arts manual to send you away. How could I have seen you? Master. Zhang Pinger's face was flushed red again. Zhang Xiaohua touched her nose and didn't know how to deal with it. Well, Ren Xiaoyao, you go down with Ping first. You are a special case as a probationary disciple. If I hadn't grown up with the hierarch, she wouldn't have been able to refuse this favor. If you want to enter the inner sect, it will be a little tricky. The martial arts assessment must be passed. I can't do it, but looking at your lightness skill, it shouldn't be a problem. When Lian Yin has the skill, I'll let you take the assessment quickly. During this time, follow Ping to see our distant fire hall. Zhang Pinger was very happy to hear this. I will follow Master's order. Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands. I will follow the Deputy Palace Master's arrangement. When they came out of Zhang Pinger's master's place, the sky was getting dark. Zhang Pinger smiled and said, Senior brother, it's already late. You must be hungry. How about we eat first, and then let the male disciples take you to rest? This, Zhang Xiaohua was a little hesitant. After thinking for a while, she said, I'm not hungry. I'm tired from walking all the way. Why don't I rest early? I see. Zhang Pinger was a little surprised. She smiled bitterly and said, It's not convenient for little sister to go to the male disciples' resting place. Now it's time to eat. Senior brother, come with me to the dining room. Feel free to eat, and let them take you back to rest. Of course, of course. Zhang Xiaohua came to a realization and quickly said. The dining room in Lihua Hall was much better than Tianmu Peak's dining room. Even the rooms were elegant, and the people eating there were refined. They weren't as vulgar as Zhang Xiaohua had seen when she first came to Tianmu Peak. Zhang Pinger came to a dining room and didn't enter. She waved her hand and beckoned a male disciple who was slightly younger than Zhang Xiaohua. After giving him a few instructions, she smiled apologetically and said, Junior Brother Ren, feel free to eat. After that, you can follow Junior Brother D. Your accommodation has already been arranged. Thank you, Senior Martial Sister Zhang and Junior Martial Brother D. Zhang Xiaohua replied with a smile. After speaking, Zhang Pinger glanced at Zhang Xiaohua and hurriedly left. Junior Brother D was also observant. With a smile on his face, he said, Senior Brother Ren, please, this way please. As he spoke, he brought Zhang Xiaohua into the dining room. Even though everyone in the dining room was refined, they were all stunned when they saw a stranger enter. The entire dining room fell silent. Zhang Xiaohua could be considered as someone who had seen many grand occasions. She wasn't at a loss like she was back in Huanxi Manor. She smiled and scanned the dining room. When she saw an empty table at the side, she asked, Junior Brother D, is that place okay? Junior Brother D nodded. Anywhere is fine. Only Senior Brother Ren likes it. Zhang Xiaohua sat down quietly and casually ate the vegetables and unknown fruits on the table. At this moment, The previously silent dining room immediately became lively again. It could be said that it was noisy. It was far from the good atmosphere that Zhang Xiaohua had seen earlier. It seemed that everyone was whispering to each other and glancing at Zhang Xiaohua from the corner of their eyes. Needless to say, they were all discussing the origin of Zhang Xiaohua. In less than half a meal, all the disciples in the dining room knew about it, under the disclosure of some well-informed disciples. As a result, the expressions in their eyes became interesting. There were jealousy, admiration, injustice, mockery, and so on. There were all kinds of different expressions. Zhang Xiaohua looked at them with her divine sense and ignored them. She only lowered her head, as if she couldn't get along with the vegetables on the table. There were still many male disciples who came over. There were both young and old, but there were no exceptions. They all looked at Zhang Xiaohua in astonishment and then sat at other tables. No one sat with him. Even junior brother D, although his attitude was respectful, he chose a chair at the side and didn't sit at the same table with him. Just when the dining room was a little chaotic, it suddenly became quiet again. A disciple who was about 30 years old, with a slightly yellow face and broom-like eyebrows, stood at the entrance of the dining room with a frown. Zhang Xiaohua, who was eating with his head lowered, was startled. It was obvious that the silence was meant to welcome this disciple. The yellow-skinned disciple swept his gaze across the dining hall and easily spotted Zhang Xiaohua, who was sitting alone at the side. His frown deepened as he strode over. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua, who had his head lowered, he did not say anything. He sat down and ate as usual. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she could only raise her head and nod slightly at the disciple. Unfortunately, the disciple only glanced at her and didn't respond. He really has a personality. Zhang Xiaohua mocked herself in her heart. Strangely enough, after this disciple arrived, the dining hall immediately regained its tranquility. Even if there were people whispering to each other, it was extremely soft. If one did not prick up one's ears, one would not be able to hear it. The meal was finished very quickly. However, Zhang Xiaohua felt depressed as she sat there. When she saw that junior brother D was almost done eating, she stood up and looked at him. Just as she was about to turn around, she heard the disciple who had been eating with his head lowered say, "You are the alchemy disciple recommended by senior sister Zhang?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at the disciple, nodded, and said, "I am Ren Xiaoyao. Senior brother, please advise me." "Well, okay, I'll give you some advice in the future." The disciple lowered his head and continued to eat, ignoring Zhang Xiaohua. -4. Chapter 837. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless when she heard Rinpoche's reply. She had seen impolite people before, but she had never seen someone as rude as him. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head slightly and followed junior brother D out of the dining hall. Junior brother D brought Rinpoche to a remote hut and smiled apologetically. "Senior brother Rin, you are not a disciple of our Fire Palace Hall yet, so you cannot stay with us ordinary disciples. We don't have any guest rooms in our Fire Palace Hall, so we listened to Senior Sister Zhang's instructions and cleaned up a room here. Senior brother Rin, please excuse us." Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and smiled. "Thank you, junior brother D, for your hard work. There is nothing to be unhappy about." "All right then. Senior brother Rin, please rest early. I reckon that senior sister Zhang will look for you tomorrow. I will come over early in the morning." After junior brother D cupped his hands and bade farewell, Zhang Xiaohua pushed open the door and entered the hut. The hut was very exquisite, and there was nothing special about it. Rinpoche could smell the dust in the air. It seemed that no one had lived in it for a long time, and it was recently cleaned up. Zhang Xiaohua didn't mind and set up a restriction. She sat cross-legged on the praying mat and began to cultivate. After a long time, the night gradually darkened. A dark gray figure suddenly emerged from the forest beside the hut. However, he did not use any qinggong. Instead, he tiptoed to the side of the hut where Zhang Xiaohua was. He leaned against the door and pricked up his ears to listen for a long time. He then looked around, but there was no movement. Then, he floated up to the roof. He was as light as a feather. Everything was exactly the same as it was earlier. However, after listening for a long time, there was still no movement. He couldn't help but be surprised. He scratched his head and bent down in disbelief. After a while, he blurted out, "Are you kidding me? Didn't you arrange for this hut?" After he finished speaking, he stood up and looked around to see if there were any other huts. He then used his movement techniques and left. He was really high and floated. He looked like an expert in movement techniques. Once he was far away, Zhang Xiaohua's tall and thin figure came out of the room and stood on a rock not far away. She thoughtfully looked at the back of the man who was leaving and unconsciously shook her head at this time. At the peak of Lingxiang Peak, in the exquisite small courtyard with the lotus leaf pond, Peacock, who was dressed in a pure white palace dress, and Chen Shun, who was dressed in green, were sitting in a small pavilion with respectful expressions. Under the night sky, outside the pavilion, there was Master Jingfan standing with her hands behind her back. Her eyes were looking at the bright moon hanging in the night sky, and she did not speak for a long time. After an unknown amount of time, Peacock and Chen Shun did not show any signs of impatience. They just sat there carefully. Even Chen Shun was no longer as playful as before. At this moment, Jingfan sighed. "Sigh, it's another year's mainline selection. I wonder if anyone will win." When Chen Shun heard this, she could not help but open her mouth. However, Peacock glared at her, and Chen Shun immediately shut her mouth. She even gritted her teeth as if she had not had enough. However, Jing Fan had already sensed it. She did not turn around and asked, "Chen Shun, do you have anything to say?" Chen Shun blinked at Peacock and smiled. "Master, your martial arts are really good. You didn't turn around, and you knew that I wanted to say something. Is this the unique skill of the Dalan Temple, mind reading? You child, how can the martial arts of the Dalan Temple be compared to that of the incense cult? Even if I don't have mind reading, how can I not know what you're thinking?" Jing Fan showed a doting look. "I've raised you since you were young. How can I not know what you are like? It's you who went to the Misty Hall and made a mess. I'm also aware of it. Sigh, look at you. It's fine if you want to pass on the orders of the cult leader, but you want to be the clear sky. The cult leader doesn't need you to verify anything. He only needs to go to Serene Peak and show the token." "Master," Chen Shun said coquettishly, "that Zhao Jian is really despicable. He deserves to die. Although Xiazai was blind and fell in love with him, but, after all, they were husband and wife. He has to treat her well. I think even if Xiazai knew the truth, she might not report him. He actually tried to kill her. Although Xiazai is not a disciple of our inner sect, I still sympathize with her. If I didn't tell the matter clearly in front of the disciples of the Misty Hall, who would have seen Zhao Jian's ugly face? Then, who would be able to see through cult master's foresight and see through everything?" "Haha," Jing Fan looked at her and then at Peacock, saying, "This must be the arrangement of the cult leader. He knows that you like to cause trouble and also went to the Orchid Dusk. He also knows that there is a female disciple with the same name as you. That's why he let you go and not Peacock." "That's right," Peacock also said, "Such a fun thing. I also want to go and see." However, Zhong Pei is also blind. He actually fell for Zhao Jian's trick and captured the disciple who had done a great deed for the Misty Hall to interrogate. Is he crazy? How can the Beast Tide have any connection with the Misty School? "Senior sister, this is your fault," Chin Chin said seriously. "I thought so too. But when I went there and heard what everyone said, I thought about it carefully. Zhong Pei is not only crazy, he is extremely smart." "Oh?" Peacock was stunned, saying this, "Why is that? I didn't think too much about it." Abishjing Fan shook her head slightly. "Peacock, you are kind by nature and have a cold temperament. You are a good seedling to cultivate the Mortal Heart Sutra. However, your success depends on your temperament. If you want to win this main selection, you have to understand Zhong Pei's intentions." Then, she praised Chen Shun. "Chen Shun, you have gained something from this trip. You can actually understand people's thoughts. That's rare." "Haha, it's nothing, Master." Chen Shun smiled and said, "Isn't it all because of Master's teachings? It's not easy for the cult leader to send me on a mission. How can I not be aware?" Then, Chen Shan said to Peacock, "Actually, senior sister, Zhong Pei knew that the cult leader didn't have a good idea to take the Misty School under his wing without hurting his relationship with senior sister Yang. That's why he took the risk and let the cult leader see his loyalty. If it succeeds, it will be good. Even if it doesn't, he is still a loyal disciple. Sigh, I know. But to use the lives of dozens of people to make a deal, I can't do it. Besides, the Misty School is just struggling at death's door. What value can it have? Isn't the cult leader overthinking it? Peacock, if you want to pass the official selection and stand out, then you have to stop thinking like this. As the saying goes, a general success is built on thousands of bones. Without the blood of others, how can you achieve great things? Peacock shook her head. Master, there will be blood, but it will be the enemies. It shouldn't be innocent people. Silly child. Jing Fan shook her head slightly. She seemed to be blaming Peacock, but there was not a trace of dissatisfaction in her loving eyes. Her tone was still the same. Your mortal heart sutra is a waste. Everyone says, heaven is merciless. Only by cutting off all emotions can one see the mysteries of heaven. If you only care about the innocent, how can you achieve anything in this heart sutra? Peacock sighed. Perhaps. I believe that I am first and foremost a human. Without emotions, how can I become a human? Without a heart of compassion, how can I become a human? Only by being a human can I become a saint, and only then can I see the mysteries of heaven. Jing Fan Shirt-Eye also sighed like a peacock. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. It's just that the Mortal Heart Sutra has not been cultivated to its peak for many years. This shows how difficult it is to cultivate mortal and heaven. You have far surpassed your master's achievements in the past. You are seen by the cult leader as the most promising person to see the mysteries of heaven. But, if your understanding is wrong, Peacock, you will never reach the realm of heaven. Peacock looked stubborn. She raised her head and looked at the full moon. Her face was pure and holy. What kind of realm is heaven? How can I, a mere mortal, understand it? Only by being a qualified mortal can one be qualified to cultivate this heaven. At this point, Zhang Xiaohua's face appeared in Peacock's mind. In an instant, it filled her entire heart. Peacock frowned and was puzzled. Why? Why am I still thinking about him? At this time, Qinshan asked curiously, Master Senior, what are you talking about? I am also cultivating this Mortal Heart Sutra. Why? Can't I understand? If you understood, the cult leader would have sent you to Carefree City. Abbess Jing Fan smiled. It's just that my cultivation is not as high as yours. What's so great about that? I'll go. At this point, Qinshan remembered something and said, Oh, Senior, I forgot to tell you. I met Ren Xiaoyao at Shixin Peak. Ah? Peacock almost cried out in surprise. That guy's image had just flashed in her mind, and now it was mentioned. Not to mention Peacock, even others would cry out in surprise. As expected, Peacock's loss of composure immediately attracted Qinshan and Jing Fan's attention. Qinshan asked curiously, Senior, what's your name? Don't tell me you've forgotten about him. No, Peacock tried to cover it up. I just find it strange. Isn't this little medicine boy at Baiwe Peak? Why did he go to Shixin Peak? Did he tell you something fun again? Hearing Peacock talking about something fun, Qinshan immediately beamed with joy. He pulled Peacock and Abbess Jingfan and said, Master, Senior Sister, you don't know. This little medicine boy is really interesting. You said he was just a plant grower in the herb department of the pill sprouting hall. Why was he sent to the Orchid Dusk as soon as he came to the pill sprouting hall? Yulan Dusk? Peacock and Nunjing Fan were taken aback. Following that, Chun Chun vividly recounted the story of Zhang Xiaohua to them. Chun Chen's ability to imitate a storyteller was truly impressive. Both Nunjing Fan and Peacock were stunned by his narration as if they were listening to a storyteller. Even after Chen Qian had finished his narration, both of them were still immersed in the story. -4. Chapter 838. The first thing Nunjing Fan said when she regained her senses was, This kid is boasting. I've experienced the power of the yellow wind. Peacock, and you are no match for it. Ren Xiaoyao is just a little medicine boy. No matter how good he is at martial arts, there is no way he could have escaped from the claws of the yellow wind. But, Qinshan said anxiously, he didn't say that he ran away. He was injured by the yellow wind and was called away by a roar. That's why they thought he was dead and didn't take his life. He's not lying to me, is he? Peacock thought for a moment. Ren Xiaoyao looks like an honest man. Before he joined the fragrance cult, he was already protecting the girls. It's not an exaggeration to say that he's chivalrous. Also, according to what you said, he sacrificed himself to save the disciples of the Tuoden Hall. That's exactly his style, so I don't think he's lying. There's someone in this world who would sacrifice his own life to save others? Nanjing Fan was the first to say in disbelief, I'm old and I've seen a lot of people. How come I've never seen such a noble person? Seen a lot of people? Chen Xin covered her mouth and almost screamed. This word? It doesn't seem right. She could tell Peacock the meaning of this word, but how could she tell Nanjing Fan? Chen Xin? Nanjing Fan seemed to have noticed Chen Xin's surprise and asked, What's wrong? Do you think I said something wrong? This. Chen Xin hurriedly waved his hand and tried his best to explain. It's not that what Master said is inappropriate, but that Zhang Xiaohua is really interesting. I didn't expect him to do such a good deed. Moreover, he was seriously injured and was saved by the disciple of the Misty Hall who was valued by the hierarch. Haha, saved by someone? That's good karma. Peacock laughed. Jing Fan Shirt Eye also nodded. That's right. A few days ago, I heard from the elders in the palace that a female disciple of the Lihua Palace was also saved by someone. Moreover, that person even picked the Yuan returning grass that Vice Palace Master Yin needed, which could be considered as saving Yin Yin's life. Therefore, Yin Yin of the Lihua Palace wanted to recruit that disciple into the Lihua Palace. How is that possible? Peacock and Chen Chen laughed. Isn't Masters Jr. a little too fond of the house and its crow? Who was this female disciple? How can an ordinary disciple be accepted into the inner sect so easily? However, Lord Hierarch also agreed. However, he didn't say anything. He only allowed a probationary disciple to pass the test before he could be accepted into the inner sect. Haha, that's good too. Since that disciple was defeated in the test, it can be considered that Martial Uncle Een has given him a chance to repay the kindness of the origin returning grass. She can also bestow him a cultivation technique, and this matter will be settled. Martial Uncle Een, who is this disciple? Why is there no order in doing things? Why are you causing trouble for Lord Hierarch? Abbess Jing Fan shook her head. The Orchid Dusk refinement is a tragedy, followed by the main selection that occurs once every 10 years. How can I have the time to care about this? I believe that Lord Hierarch is being pestered by Een and has no choice but to do this. Right, Master, when I asked you about the Misty School, you said that it's not that simple. Why is that? Chen Shun couldn't help but recall what Abbess Jing Fan said just now. That's a good question. Abbess Jing Fan nodded. I was just about to tell you. Actually, speaking of the Misty School, I believe you all know that this Misty School is the same as our Fragrance sect. It's a big sect that passed down the path of immortality 10,000 years ago. However, in the past 1,000 years, it has gradually declined and lost its prestige. As the inner disciples of our Misty Temple, you all must know about the legend of immortality. You know that immortality isn't just an illusion, it really existed 10,000 years ago. Our Fragrance sect and Misty School, as well as the Dalan Temple, all have the legacy of immortality. Chen Chun spoke first. Of course, isn't the purpose of our main selection to choose the best female disciple to inherit the immortality of Fragrance sect? Sigh, yes, you're right. But do you know? In the main selection that occurs once every 10 years, our Fragrance sect hasn't chosen a suitable disciple for the past 50 years. Also, our Fragrance sect's secret room seems to be getting worse. If we still can't find a suitable disciple after 20 years, then not only will our Fragrance sect be like the Misty School, will gradually decline. We might not even be able to choose a leader. Peacock and Chun Chun's faces were also gloomy. They said unwillingly, Master, why must our Fragrance sect's leader be a disciple? Didn't the Misty School not force it? What do kids know? Nanjing Fan glared at them. It's because of the Misty School's lack of understanding that led to their decline. Our Fragrance sect, the Dalan Temple, and even the Tenryu sect, which one of us doesn't have such strict requirements. That's how the immortality of immortality can be passed down from generation to generation. After so many trials and tribulations, we're still safe and sound? That's right. If the Misty School doesn't have any benefits, then why? Chun was still doubtful. Didn't we just say that our fragrance sect hasn't chosen a suitable female disciple for the past 50 years? The Dalan Temple seems to have encountered the same problem. Since we can't find the reason, we have to look outside. The Tenryu sect doesn't bother us. We're lucky that they didn't provoke us. We have no reason to look for trouble. Before Nanjing Fan could finish, Peacock shouted, "The Tenryu sect has robbed and killed disciples on their way back to their sect. How can they say that they didn't provoke us?" Nanjing Fan waved her hand. The Tenryu sect has always been cruel and merciless. Once they make a move, there's no way to survive. If they want to kill you, you won't be able to come back alive. The elders in Imo Xian's palace think that the disciple who tried to kill you might not be from the Tenryu sect. Not from the Tenryu sect? Then which sect is it? Peacock was even more surprised. I wouldn't dare to boast about my martial arts. I've seen the blade with my own eyes. Which sect in Jianghu would have such power? Which sect is it exactly? Even the elders don't know. After all, our fragrant sect is located in a corner, and it's not convenient for us to get involved in Jianghu. It's difficult to find out who it is. Nanjing Fan smiled and said, "Peacock, don't worry. As long as we find out who it is, the fragrance sect will seek justice for you." "Nun, please continue. I'm waiting to hear more." Chun Chen's face was full of anticipation, as if she was listening to a legend. I'll continue." Nanjing Fan smiled and said, "I was going to tell you about this later. Since you're about to participate in the selection, I'll let you know more about it now." Since our leader couldn't find the reason for the selection from the outside and had to solve the problem of saving the inheritance chamber, he turned his attention to the Misty School in Pingyang City. Before our disciples in the outer sect could make a move, the leader of the Righteous Alliance, Zhang San, wanted to join forces with us to deal with the Misty School through the people in the outer sect. Coincidentally, when Zhang San sent the message, the restriction of Dianchi Lake was loosened. Our leader got the news immediately. This is also a coincidence. You said that our leader's last disciple was in the Misty School. If it was any other day, he would have rejected it immediately. Maybe he would have taken the opportunity to destroy the Righteous Alliance while the restriction was loosened. But at this time, our leader wanted to see what secrets the Misty School had, so he agreed. However, the plan could not keep up with the changes. Zhang Sin also had his own plans. From the beginning, he went behind the sect leader and Dalan Temple's back and killed the two junior brothers of the ethereal sect's sect leader, Openg. In an instant, there was a death grudge. Later on, things got out of hand. Openg committed suicide, and so did his eldest direct disciple. The situation was completely out of the sect leader's control. Although the sect leader was helpless, he could only follow the previous agreement and send the ethereal mountain villa and ethereal peak to the Righteous Alliance. All the ethereal sect's disciples were crippled of their martial arts and were brought back to Serene Peak by Yang Rupiang. Hearing this, Peacock asked curiously, "Master, didn't our leader want to find a solution to the problem of the inheritance chamber? Misty Villa and Misty Peak were given to the Righteous Alliance. Where can we find a solution?" Master Jing Fan hesitated for a moment and said, "At first, our leader wanted to start with Misty Peak and Misty Villa, but then the situation changed. There was a better place than Misty Peak. According to our leader, there must be a solution to the inheritance chamber in that place, so we gave Misty Peak and Misty Villa to the Righteous Alliance." Haha. In fact, if you think about the decline of the Misty School, you can know that the Misty School didn't have a good way to pass down the inheritance. The possibility of Misty Peak finding a solution is very small. Then, what's a better place than Misty Peak? Chen asked. I don't know. Because of Openg's suicide, all clues to find this place were cut off. Now, only Openg's resurrection can tell us where to go or how to enter that place. I say, our leader put all the disciples of the Misty School at Serene Peak, the faction leader's sister at the back of the mountain, and even the disciples who were crippled of their martial arts were gathered together without doing anything else. I didn't know that our leader had so many plans. Haha, that's right. Senior sister was chosen by the Righteous Alliance 60 years ago. Her martial arts and wisdom are unmatched by the other senior sisters. Everything she did was planned far ahead. Then, she looked at Peacock and Chen Shun and said earnestly, I hope that the two of you can also stand out in the righteous alliance this time and inherit the legacy of our fragrance sect, becoming the new generation's leader. Peacock and Chen Shun smiled bitterly. Master, you should lower your expectations. It's been 50 years and so many senior sisters couldn't stand out in the righteous alliance. Our martial arts are probably not good enough. Master Jing Fan smiled mysteriously. The righteous alliance is related to martial arts, but the real deciding factor is not martial arts. -4. Chapter 839. Not martial arts? Chen Chen and Peacock asked curiously, then what is it? This. Nanjing Fan was at a loss for words. Maybe it's luck? Maybe it's fate? Maybe it's a test of the mind? I'm not sure myself. After all, I've participated in the selection, but I didn't succeed. However, according to Senior Sister, martial arts shouldn't be that important. She also said that if I can improve my Mortal Heart Sutra, I might be able to pass the selection. Io, Master, that means Senior Sister still has a chance. Chun Chun said happily. Isn't that so? It's because Peacock's Mortal Heart Sutra is so good that even though her martial arts aren't the best, doesn't the sect leader still regard her as an elite? Even the sect leader sent Peacock to the sacrificial ceremony in Carefree City? Hee, Senior Sister. If you become the sect leader, you must take good care of me. Chun Chun began to plan for his future. We haven't even taken any shape yet. What's the point of saying this? Peacock shook her head. Book it in advance. You're in a bad situation now, so it's easier to talk to you. If you really pass the selection, it won't be easy for me to talk to you. It's better to say it now. Chun Chun curled his lips and said, I know. Who doesn't care? Who doesn't care about you? Hurry up and cultivate. Who knows, you might pass the selection and I might not. All right, the two of you stop quarreling. Don't I only have the two of you as my disciples? It's good that you two love each other. It's only a few days until the selection. Hurry up and cultivate. You only have one chance. If you fail this time, you won't have another chance in the future. It's better to make good use of this opportunity. Nanjing Fan said and walked out of the pavilion, leaving Peacock and Chen Shan to meditate and cultivate the Mortal Heart Sutra under the moonlight. However, not long after, Peacock opened her eyes and looked at the setting full moon. She thought to herself, why is this happening? I haven't seen this person for a long time. Why did he appear again today? Could it be that I can't get rid of this nemesis in my life? The nemesis that the Peacock spoke of was not at the Shershin Peak as she had imagined. Instead, it was at a small hut in the Fiery Palace, which was an unknown distance away from the Peacock. Its body was shining as it absorbed the starlight, and its eyes were closed as it slept. A few days passed and Zhang Xiaohua followed Zhang Pinger around Lihua Temple. In fact, it was similar to Tuadan Hall. It was divided into medicinal herbs and alchemy. However, the medicinal herbs were all rare and precious. Ordinary herbs were not important. As for alchemy, it was done in the alchemy room. This was something that Zhang Xiaohua did not have the qualifications to observe at the moment. She could only look at it from afar. Even her divine sense could not pry into it. However, Zhang Xiaohua's alchemy skills had reached a high level and she no longer coveted the alchemy skills of Lingxiang Peak. Instead, she was amazed at how many medicinal herbs were grown in Lihua Temple. Occasionally, when she asked, Zhang Pinger would not explain in detail. She only said that there was a special method in the temple that could only be used by disciples with profound internal energy. As for what it was, she could not tell Zhang Xiaohua. However, Zhang Xiaohua had some doubts. Since Lingxiang Peak could grow these rare medicinal herbs, why would they plant some medicinal herbs that could not germinate on Tianmu Peak? Fortunately, Zhang Pinger basically did not treat Zhang Xiaohua as an outsider. Except for the secret of the temple that could not be said, these things that could not be regarded as secrets were also bluntly told. The reason was simple. When Lihua Hall planted rare spiritual grasses, it would consume something, and the more it was used, the less it would be used. If it wasn't for Lihua Hall's spiritual grasses such as the rejuvenating jade pill, which was an essential elixir used by the inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak, Lihua Hall would only plant some spiritual grasses. The cost of planting such spiritual grasses was too high. Even from Lingering Fragrance Peak's point of view, it wasn't very cost-effective. When they saw that Huanxi Mountain Villa could grow spiritual grasses without using their own methods, they were naturally overjoyed. According to the purpose of frugality, they would interrogate the cultivation method of spiritual grasses while planting some spiritual grasses on Tianmu Peak, hoping to find a feasible way to grow them. After listening to this, Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood that the method of planting the medicinal herbs in Lihua Hall was definitely related to the primordial stones. That was to say, they had their own unique incantation. Well, it could not be called an incantation. It was just like the 3 auspicious treasures of the Righteous Alliance. They used something similar to an incantation to guide the primordial stones out of the primordial stones and instilled it into the medicinal herbs in the medicinal field. Perhaps this was the real method of planting the medicinal herbs when the immortal Tao was flourishing? Zhang Xiaohua touched her nose and guessed very matter-of-factly. Of course, planting the medicinal herbs like planting crops was really not very compatible with the status of the medicinal herbs. During this period, Zhang Xiaohua also secretly inquired about Zhongpei's location. She roughly knew that he was on the mountainside of the Lingering Fragrance Peak. As for the specific location, Zhang Xiaohua did not know. Moreover, there were many restrictions on the Lingering Fragrance Peak. If one did not have the waste token of the Lingering Fragrance Peak, one could only move within one's own area and could not even take a step away from it. Even within the boundary of Imo-Xian Palace, there was a powerful protective array. According to what Zhang Xiaohua said, it was so powerful that even the protective array at the foot of the mountain could not be compared to it. Therefore, without understanding the situation of the entire Lingering Fragrance Peak, Zhang Xiaohua temporarily gave up the idea of directly rushing to the peak of Lingering Fragrance Peak. She did not know why, but the martial arts test that Zhang Xiaohua's master had arranged had not been carried out. Although this test was extremely simple to Zhang Pinger, without this test, Zhang Xiaohua would not be able to obtain the waste token of an inner disciple. Therefore, she often went to look for her master, and did not come to look for Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua also saw some clues and asked Zhang Pinger if there were any accidents. However, Zhang Pinger frowned and said that Imo-Xian Palace of Lingering Fragrance Peak had some urgent matters and required the cooperation of the various hall masters. Therefore, there was no time. However, she would often look for her master and let her inform eldest senior sister to carry out the test as soon as possible. Zhang Xiaohua actually did not care too much. Seeing that Zhang Pinger was anxious, she comforted her. Anyway, she was already in distant Flame Hall, and it was only a matter of time. Zhang Pinger only forced a smile and accompanied Zhang Xiaohua for a while before leaving in a hurry. She must have gone to look for her master again. After Zhang Pinger left, Zhang Xiaohua sent her off with his gaze. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. A personal disciple of the mythical Fire Hall's Vice Hall Master was accompanying a little medicine boy who had just arrived at the mythical Fire Hall every day. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not directly say her thoughts, but how could Zhang Xiaohua, who had been baptized by Nie Qinyu, not see the hidden meaning in her words? At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was secretly regretting. Of course, she should have refused to come to Lingering Fragrance Peak when she was at Shixin Peak. However, Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head again. How could she defy the hierarch's orders? Maybe I should find a chance to talk to Zhang Pinger? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, but then she scratched her head again. What should I say? What can I say? She was conflicted, and at her wit's end. It was really difficult to reject and say hurtful words. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was pondering and even delaying her cultivation, she suddenly heard the sound of hurried footsteps coming from outside. Before the footsteps reached the front of the room, they stopped and shouted, "Junior, Brother Ren, are you in the room?" Hearing someone calling her, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Everyone she knew on Lingering Fragrance Peak was female. Now that a male disciple was calling her, it must not be a good thing. Sure enough, when Zhang Xiaohua walked out, it was a disciple she had never seen before. He cupped his hands and said, "I am Ren Xiaoyao. May I know what is the matter, senior brother?" The disciple returned the greeting and said with a smile, "My surname is Ma. You can call me Senior Brother Ma." However, The person who is looking for you is not me, but Senior Brother Yin. Zhang Xiaohua was even more surprised. Senior Brother Yin? Who is it? I don't seem to know him. Senior Brother Ma stepped forward and pulled her affectionately. It doesn't matter if you don't know him now. In any case, we will be disciples of distant Fire Palace in the future. How can you not know Senior Brother Yin? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and pulled her arm out without a trace. She smiled and said, I am not a disciple of distant Fire Palace yet. Whether I can pass the test or not is another matter. Why don't I pay a visit to Senior Brother Yin after I officially become a disciple of distant Fire Palace? What do you think? Senior Brother Ma's expression changed slightly when he saw this. His tone was a little cold as he said, Senior Brother Yin is the eldest senior amongst the male disciples of the distant Fire Palace. I think that he is extremely protective of us male disciples. Senior Brother Yin is probably looking for Junior Brother Ren because he is concerned about Junior Brother Ren's future. He has good intentions. Junior Brother Ren's pretentious actions may not necessarily hurt Senior Brother Yan's feelings. Even the disciples of the distant Fire Palace do not know how they view Junior Brother Ren. If I were Junior Brother Ren, I would definitely make this trip. Haha, my future? How the disciples of distant Fire Palace view me. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she unconsciously sneered from the bottom of her heart. Do I still care about how others view me? Do I still need to be afraid of how others view me? She originally wanted to put down her pride and ignore him. However, when she thought about how flustered she was, she decided to go out for a walk instead of staying there. Who knows, she might be able to gain something. After thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, So that's how it is. Then I really have to thank Senior Brother Yin for his concern. Then, it's better to accept politely than to decline courteously. Senior Brother Ma, please lead the way. I'm still not familiar with the situation of the Fiery Palace, so please don't lead me to the fork in the road. These words had a double meaning. Senior Brother Ma's expression changed a little. However, it returned to normal in the blink of an eye. He laughed and said, Junior Brother Ren must be joking. We are all disciples of distant Fire Palace and see each other frequently. How can I lead you to the fork in the road? Come, Junior Brother Ren, this way please. Senior Brother Yin is still waiting. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and followed Senior Martial Brother Ma to a desolate mountain valley. When Zhang Xiaohua saw Senior Martial Brother Yin, who was casually sitting on a rock, she was stunned. Why is he here? -4. Chapter 840. When Zhang Xiaohua saw Senior Martial Brother Yin, who had been waiting for a long time, she was stunned. Why is he here? She might not be familiar with this person, but she had only met him once. He was the one who shared a table with Zhang Xiaohua on her first night here. Yes, he had even warned Zhang Xiaohua that he would definitely teach him when he had the time. He was indeed a man of his word. He was here to teach Zhang Xiaohua. Senior Martial Brother Ma walked over to Senior Martial Brother Yin, who was casually sitting on a rock. His attitude was very respectful as he cupped his hands and bowed. Senior Martial Brother Yin, Ren Xiaoyao is here. Senior Martial Brother Yin had been watching all along. He waved his hand and said, All right, you can go now. After Senior Martial Brother Ma left, Senior Martial Brother Yin did not say anything. He only looked at Zhang Xiaohua with interest, as if he was looking at a stranger. Zhang Xiaohua did not mind and stood straight. Although her eyes were not provocative, she did not avoid his gaze. She was also observing Senior Martial Brother Yin. After a moment of silence, Senior Martial Brother Yin retracted his gaze and looked at the pure white sea of clouds on Lingering Fragrance Peak. He smiled and said, My name is Yin Jianhan. This should be the second time I meet Junior Brother Ren. Zhang Xiaohua was amused by his deep look. She nodded and said, Thank you for sharing a table with me that day. Senior Martial Brother Yin, I remember that Senior Martial Brother Yin said that you would teach me. I did not expect that the teaching would come so quickly. Yin Jianhan glanced at her and was a little surprised. He said with disdain, Teaching? Not really. I just wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with you. A heart-to-heart talk? Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, talking about life and ambitions. I have always talked to girls. I am not interested in people like Senior Martial Brother Yin. Yin Jianhan seemed to be touched by something. His face turned cold and he said, "Unfortunately, my heart-to-heart talk has never been about romance. I only talk to people who have eyes but fail to see." Zhang Xiaohua chuckled. "Since I have nothing to do, I would like to ask Senior Marshal Brother Yin for advice. What do you want to talk to me about?" "Brother?" Yin Jianhan was even more disdainful. "You want to be my brother? You are not qualified. You can just call me Senior Marshal Brother Yin." Faint. Zhang Xiaohua almost vomited. She had seen disciples who were not strange, but it was the first time she had seen someone like Yin Jianhan. She could not lower herself to his level. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua could only smile bitterly. "Then please, Senior Marshal Brother Yin. Who knows, Senior Marshal Sister Zhang might have something to tell me later." Yin Jianhan became even angrier when Zhang Ping'er was mentioned. He took a deep breath and stood on the huge rock. He turned his head and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Ren, I know that you were able to establish a relationship with Senior Marshal Sister Zhang from an ordinary disciple of the Pill Tower Hall. You must have put in a lot of effort to get her to help you accommodate the Deputy Hall Master and give you the status of a preparatory disciple. However, to be honest, the distant Fire Hall is not suitable for you. I advise you to obediently return to the White Mountain Peak and be an obedient little medicine boy. If you agree, I will give you the appropriate compensation." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was very happy. She said with interest, "I wonder what kind of compensation Senior Marshal Brother Yin can give me that can make up for my regret of not being able to enter the inner sect?" Yin Jianhan said with disdain, "Entering the inner sect is only for medicinal pills and martial arts. I will give you enough medicinal pills and a complete set of internal strength cultivation methods for inner sect disciples. What do you think?" Zhang Xiaohua said unhurriedly, "If I enter the inner sect, what you said will be easy. If you were me, would you choose to go back?" Yin Jianhan's eyes narrowed a few times. Do you think you have the confidence to pass the martial arts test?" "I don't have the slightest confidence. Does it have anything to do with you?" Zhang Xiaohua snorted. Yin Jianhan was furious. He jumped down from the huge rock and wanted to grab Zhang Xiaohua's collar. How could Zhang Xiaohua let him get close to her? Just as she was about to raise her hand to block, her heart skipped a beat. Her body tilted and Yin Jianhan's hand was on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. Zhang Xiaohua pretended to be angry and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Yin, the inner sect forbids disciples from fighting each other. If you know what's good for you, you should let go of your hand." Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was acting arrogant, Yin Jianhan laughed and said, "The inner sect forbids disciples from fighting each other, but it doesn't prohibit disciples from learning from each other. Junior Brother Ran and I are only competing in martial arts. What can the inner sect say about that?" Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. At this moment, Yin Jianhan changed his expression and said coldly, "Junior Brother Ren, I see that you are doing well in the White Mountain Peak. Have you forgotten your identity? This is the Flame Hall of the Lingxiang Peak, not your small pill expanding hall. I don't care if you can pass the bullshit martial arts test. I just want to tell you that you should stay away from Zhang Ping'er." "What the?" Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. "Why is it another jealous guy?" Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to explain feebly, "Senior Brother Yin, I think you've misunderstood. Senior Sister Zhang and I have a pure relationship. It's not like what you're imagining. Senior Sister Zhang only said a few words in front of the Vice Palace Master out of gratitude because I saved her during the Twilight Orchid refinement. Therefore, Senior Brother Yin, you should continue to be busy with whatever you were busy with in the past. Please don't count me in. Really." When Yin Jianhan heard this, a trace of disdain appeared on his face. "I originally thought that Senior Marshal Sister Zhang had her eyes on some hero. But when I saw you, I was displeased. When I heard what you said today, I was even more displeased. Look at you, as a man. If you like Senior Marshal Sister Zhang, then so be it. Why did you back off when I threatened you? I really despise your actions. I really don't know what Zhang Ping'er likes about you." Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth and wanted to explain, but Yin Jianhan tightened his grip. "Don't talk to me about saving Senior Marshal Sister Zhang. Good girl. You even plucked the origin returning grass. Senior Marshal Sister Zhang did all of this, right? I want to know what kind of bewitching method you used to make senior martial sister Zhang so muddle-headed. Yin Jianhan tightened his grip. Zhang Xiaohua felt the force on her shoulders and immediately cried out, "Senior martial brother, I'm telling the truth. I definitely saved Zhang Pinger. I was also the one who plucked the origin returning grass." Yin Jianhan tightened his grip even more. "Who are you trying to fool? With your martial arts? You can't even withstand 3 of my moves. How did you save senior martial sister Zhang?" Initially, Zhang Xiaohua felt pity for Yin Jianhan when she saw that Yin Jianhan was forcing her because of Zhang Pinger. She did not want to get involved in this dispute, so she did not retaliate. She only compromised and thought that it would be over if she took a step back. However, when she saw that Yin Jianhan's grip did not lessen and even showed signs of crippling her, she became furious. What she hated the most was to see people using their martial arts to bully others. Therefore, she coldly said, "Yin Jianhan, if you're a man, then go find Yuzhuachuan. Why do you have to make fun of me, a disciple who just entered the distant fire hall?" When he heard Zhang Xiaohua mention Yuzhuachuan, Yin Jianhan's face became even more ferocious. "See, you still say that you have nothing to do with her. Even Yuzhuachuan knows about it. Why are you still pretending? Let me take care of you first. After that, I will find Yuzhuachuan and let him know how powerful I am." Unfortunately, Yin Jianhan's arrogance came to an end. Zhang Xiaohua could not take it anymore. She stood up and shook her arm that was grabbed by Yin Jianhan. It was as if she was shaking off a fly on her sleeve. A huge force rushed towards Yin Jianhan's arm. Yin Jianhan could not hold it in and his body staggered backward. "Huh, you're really strong. You're really strong." Yin Jianhan clapped his hands and praised. Then, he got into a stance and drew circles with both his hands. It was a move that alternated between real and fake. Then, he attacked Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was impatient. Just like before, she shook her left hand and grabbed Yin Jianhan's neck. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's left hand approaching him at lightning speed, Yin Jianhan's eyes revealed a look of disbelief for the first time. He did not care whether his moves were real or fake. He flipped his hands upwards and spat out his inner energy. He wanted to hit Zhang Xiaohua's wrist. Seeing how Yin Jianhan's moves changed rapidly and how his palms were filled with inner energy, Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to use her arm to block in front of her. She retracted her arm and took a step forward. Then, she circulated her inner energy and attacked with the Big Dipper magical fist. Yin Jianhan saw that Zhang Xiaohua's moves were simple, but they were filled with energy. There were also rarely any flaws in her moves. He subconsciously stopped underestimating her and focused his attention on Zhang Xiaohua. In this short period of time, both of them had a rough understanding of each other. The more Yin Jianhan fought, the more fearful he became. Zhang Xiaohua was like a deep pool that Yin Jianhan could not see the bottom of. Zhang Xiaohua casually threw out moves. Although these moves did not look too different, they were able to block Yin Jianhan's moves with great precision. The strength in his hands was just right, able to block Yin Jianhan's internal energy. Not even a little bit more would be enough to block Yin Jianhan's internal energy. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohua was even more relaxed. She casually executed a few more moves and lifted her body up. Before Yin Jianhan could react, she immediately pressed on the major acupoints on his head. Then, Zhang Xiaohua closed her eyes slightly as if she was thinking about something. Then, her fingers danced like butterflies and randomly pressed on Yin Jianhan's head. Just as Zhang Xiaohua's fingers left his head, Yin Jianhan, who had his acupoints pressed by Zhang Xiaohua, suddenly opened his eyes. However, the look in his eyes was lifeless as he stared straight ahead. Looking at Yin Jianhan's appearance, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and asked softly, "What is your name?" "Yin Jianhan." Yin Jianhan's reply was a little slow, and his voice was flat. "Ha ha ha." Zhang Xiaohua laughed out loud when she heard it. Her body spun a few times in the air and she laughed. "Bewitching finger. You really live up to your reputation." -4. Chapter 841. When senior brother Ma walked out of the valley, he didn't walk too far. He just strolled around and muttered to himself, "Senior brother Yin, please be a little more lenient. Senior sister Zhang personally picked this guy to come to Lihua Hall. I can't afford to offend you, and I can't afford to offend senior sister Zhang. If you were to accidentally injure Ren Xiaoyao, I was the one who called him out. When he came out, many people saw him. I can't afford to bear the consequences. Just as he was anxiously pacing back and forth, praying for mercy from the heavens, he heard footsteps from the forest behind him. Senior brother Ma immediately turned around. Before he could see clearly, he asked, Senior brother Yin, you wouldn't cripple that brat, right? But before he could finish his sentence, he saw the scene in front of him. He immediately shut his mouth and stood there like a stone statue. His jaw couldn't even close. He saw Yin Jianhan holding onto Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder affectionately. As he walked, he said something. When he got closer, he waved his hand and said to Senior Brother Ma, Junior Brother Ma, bring Junior Brother Ren back. He said that he doesn't know the way. If you don't bring him along, he will barge into Emotian Palace. Oh, okay. I will immediately bring Junior Brother Ren back. Senior Brother Ma, who had just reacted, immediately woke up from his daze. He smiled and said, Of course. Just now, I was the one who brought Junior Brother Ren out. Now, I will definitely be the one bringing him back. Thank you, Senior Brother Ma. Zhang Xiaohua appeared especially polite. Oh, right. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was about to leave with Senior Brother Ma, Yin Jinhan called out, Junior Brother Ma, in the future, Junior Brother Ren will be a brother of our Lihua Hall. You and the other disciples have to take care of Junior Brother Ren. After all, he has just joined our Lihua Hall. But Senior Brother Ma had a different opinion. Junior Brother Ren hasn't passed the test, right? Test? Yin Jinhan waved his hand and said, If Junior Brother Ren's martial arts can't pass the test, who else can? After he finished speaking, he turned around and walked away. Only after he had walked far away did he pat the back of his head and muttered to himself, What's going on? Why does my head hurt so much? And it was also very strange. Could it be that something had happened to his face? But I don't have any impression of it at all. In the distance, Zhang Xiaohua followed behind Senior Brother Ma with a smug look on her face. Although it was her first time using Bewitching Finger, the effect was extremely satisfying for Zhang Xiaohua. Under Zhang Xiaohua's questioning, Yin Jinhan almost told her about how he was still wetting his bed when he was 5 years old. The first thing that Zhang Xiaohua wanted to ask about was Zhong Pei's residence. Unfortunately, Yin Jinhan and Zhang Pinger were the same. They both knew roughly where the male disciples of Emotian Palace lived. However, it was impossible for him to explain it clearly. Yin Jinhan didn't even know who Zhong Pei was. The second thing that Zhang Xiaohua wanted to ask about was naturally Zhang Pinger. According to Yin Jianhan, Zhang Pinger was the one with the most outstanding appearance among the 7 female disciples of Fiery Palace's Vice Palace Master Yin Yin. Moreover, Zhang Pinger had never spoken much to any of the male disciples since she was young. She had always treated them coldly. Therefore, in the mouths of the male disciples of Fiery Palace, Zhang Pinger had the nickname of Ice Beauty. Zhang Pinger had always been doted on by Yin Yin. Among the 6 senior sisters, a few of them were biased towards her. In Lihua Palace, she could be considered to have everything she wanted. As for the third senior sister, Mei Suiying, of course, she was jealous of Zhang Pinger's favor in front of Yin Yin. Therefore, she made things difficult for her. Especially during the Orchid Evening Refinement, Zhang Pinger had risked her life to pick the origin returning grass from the Orchid Grand Canyon, saving Yin Yin's life. This made Mei Suiying even more jealous. After all, after Zhang Pinger had recovered from her injuries, her position in Yin Yin's eyes had risen by a lot. The third thing that Zhang Xiaohua wanted to ask about was the inner disciple Yu Zhuochuan that she had met on the way to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Previously, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that there were so many differences between the inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak. She thought that Yu Zhuochuan was similar to her. Now that she had inquired from Yin Jianhan, she found out that Yu Zhuochuan was actually the youngest inner disciple in Emotian's palace. Even Yin Jianhan didn't dare to have any ideas about her. Speaking of this, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. From Yin Jianhan's words, she finally knew that in the eyes of the Lihua Palace's disciples, she had relied on Zhang Pinger's connections to enter Lihua Palace. As for herself, she had actually become a gigolo who hugged Zhang Pinger's thigh. Isn't it funny? Zhang Xiaohua immediately thought of her second brother's situation in the Misty School. Wasn't it exactly the same? As for Yu Zhuochuan and Zhang Pinger, according to Yin Jianhan, a while before the Valley Orchid Dust refinement, Lihua Palace's Yin was seriously ill. Zhang Pinger was in a bad mood and tried her best to treat her master's illness. Yu Zhuochuan seemed to have this plan long ago. She actually took advantage of the situation and brought Zhang Pinger many rare spiritual herbs. She almost won Zhang Pinger's heart. This made Yin Jianhan, who still had high hopes for Zhang Pinger, extremely angry. What made Yin Jianhan happy was that after Zhang Pinger returned from the Valley Orchid Grand Canyon, her attitude towards Yu Zhuochuan took a turn for the worse. She was like a completely different person, completely ignoring her. However, what made Yin Jianhan angry was that Zhang Pinger actually worked hard for an ordinary disciple from the pill-expanding hall to enter Lihua Palace. This was also the reason why Yin Jianhan wanted to show off his power the moment he saw Zhang Xiaohua. So it's like this. After listening to Yin Jianhan's narration, Zhang Xiaohua left and understood Yu Zhuochuan's attitude towards her and Yin Jianhan's lesson today. Sigh, what should I do? Walking behind senior brother Ma, Zhang Xiaohua recalled what Yin Jianhan said and unconsciously sighed. Although Zhang Pinger was beautiful, she didn't have any feelings for her. Furthermore, she still hadn't dealt with Nie Qianyu, who was far away in Rejuvenation Valley. She didn't even know where Nie Qianyu was, so how could she dare to cause trouble? Junior brother Ren, why are you sighing? When senior brother Ma heard this, he was extremely concerned and asked, could it be that senior brother Yin made things difficult for you? Then, he carefully looked around and said, Junior brother Ren, please don't blame me. Senior brother Yin has always been very good to us. If he asks me to do something, I can't refuse. Moreover, although senior brother Yan's mouth is arrogant, he's actually a very good person. Even if he made things difficult for you, he wouldn't do it for no reason. Oh, I didn't say it properly. It should be that his subordinates know when to stop. Know when to stop? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but laugh. She thought to herself, if he was grabbing my arm like he wanted to break it, how could he say know when to stop? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's disdainful look, senior brother Ma felt awkward. He carefully said, I was only following orders. Junior brother Ren, in the future, when senior sister Zhang. Before he could finish his sentence, he heard a loud shout from afar. Ren Xiaoyao? Ren Xiaoyao? Where are you? Senior sister Zhang? Senior brother Ma's face instantly turned pale. He muttered, how did you get here so quickly? When Zhang Xiaohua saw senior brother Ma's expression, she couldn't help but laugh. She raised her voice and said, Senior sister Zhang, I'm here. Why are you here? When Zhang Pinger heard this from afar, she used her qing gong to come closer. When she saw senior brother Ma in front of her, she couldn't help but be stunned. She blurted out, Junior brother Ma, why are you here? Senior brother Ma didn't know how to answer. Zhang Xiaohua, who was beside him, smiled and said, I was bored in the house, so I grabbed senior brother Ma who was walking past the door and asked him to lead the way. Senior sister Zhang, you know that I have no sense of direction. As long as I walk casually, I definitely won't be able to find my way back. Zhang Pinger laughed out loud. She didn't look like the ice beauty that senior brother Ma usually saw. She couldn't help but be dumbfounded. She muttered in her heart, no wonder senior brother Yin is so angry. Look at Ren Xiaoyao. It's obvious that he and senior sister Zhang. All the disciples have sharp eyes. Senior brother Ma immediately replied, that's right. Since senior sister Zhang is here, I won't accompany junior brother Ren any longer. See you another day. After he spoke, he didn't wait for Zhang Xiaohua to thank him and quickly walked away. When he was far away, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, he's such a good person. He accompanied me for half a day and didn't even let me thank him. Ha. Zhang Pinger couldn't help but laugh again. Zhang Xiaohua looked at her strangely. When she finished laughing, she asked innocently, Junior sister, was what I said so funny? Why did you laugh when I said something? Our coordination is too good. Even the zither and the zither can't match up to you. Shua. Zhang Pinger's snow-white face turned red. She was left speechless by those words. Seeing Zhang Pinger's embarrassed expression, Zhang Xiaohua realized that she had used the wrong words. She immediately covered it up. "Oh right, junior sister. Why did you look for me in such a hurry?" When Zhang Pinger heard it, she immediately said solemnly, "Something unexpected happened. Senior brother." "Something unexpected?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. "Lord Sect Leader removed my reserve status and allowed me to return to the Pill Expanding Hall? Or can I enter the Fire Leaving Hall without taking the martial arts test?" Zhang Xiaohua directly explained both the good and bad situations. Zhang Pinger forced a smile and said, "How can there be such a far-fetched accident? Once Lord Sect Leader's decree is issued, it naturally won't be changed. It won't be what you think." Hee. Then it's the martial arts test? Zhang Xiaohua understood a little and smiled. Why? Is the martial arts test especially difficult? Zhang Pinger hesitated for a moment and nodded slightly. "Senior brother, I'm afraid it's as you said." Hee. So what? Zhang Xiaohua didn't think much of it. "Didn't you say that your eldest senior sister will be hosting? Why would she make things difficult for you?" "But third senior sister will be hosting tomorrow," Zhang Pinger said with a sad face. -4. Chapter 842. Your third senior sister? That Mei Sujin who was trying to cause trouble for you on the way to the palace? Zhang Xiaohua was extremely surprised. "That's her. She is my third senior sister. Weren't you listening to our conversation at that time?" Zhang Pinger was almost on the verge of tears. "At that time, the two of us made third senior sister very angry. She didn't like me to begin with, and now that you made her so angry, it would be strange if she didn't hold a grudge against you. This test tomorrow will definitely be extraordinary." Once she heard that Zhang Pinger's third senior sister, Mei Sujin, would be the one presiding over the test, Zhang Xiaohua's heart relaxed. She patted Zhang Pinger's shoulder and said, "Junior sister, don't be anxious. Isn't it just a martial arts test? Don't you know what kind of martial arts your senior brother is? What are we afraid of?" "But, senior brother, you really don't know. This Lingering Fragrance Peak's martial arts test has a huge difference in difficulty. It really doesn't matter." Zhang Xiaohua was still calm and smiled. "Why don't you tell me the reason?" Sigh. Zhang Pinger also sighed and slowly returned to normal. Even if she was panicking now, what use would it be? "It's like this, senior brother," Zhang Pinger explained. "These few days, I haven't been able to find Master. I only know that Emo Xian has an important matter in her palace and she can't leave. I only wanted to end your martial arts test as soon as possible. It's not a good idea to leave it hanging like this. However, I couldn't find Master, nor could eldest senior sister. My waist token couldn't reach Lingering Fragrance Peak, so I didn't know what was going on in Emo Xian's palace. I just felt that something wasn't right. When I went to look for eldest senior sister with the intention of giving it a try, I saw that she had something to do when she returned. I immediately stopped her and asked her about your test." Eldest senior sister smiled bitterly and said that Master had already instructed me to do this. She had already made the necessary arrangements and only needed you to participate in the test. However, she really had more important matters to attend to, so before I came in, she had entrusted third senior sister to manage the test. I was stunned at the time and quickly asked eldest senior sister if it was possible to stop the test and wait for her to return. But grand senior sister was a little unhappy. She said that because I kept urging her, she made an exception and entrusted the test to someone else. She wanted me to sleep early. I want to postpone the test, but I can't because third senior sister has already told her that it will be held tomorrow morning." At this point, Zhang Pinger said with a sobbing tone, "Senior brother, it's all my fault for being impatient. That's why I made a mistake. I know that third senior sister will definitely make things difficult for you. If I can calm my heart and wait for a few more days, as long as eldest senior sister conducts the test, you will definitely be able to pass." Zhang Xiaohua was even more puzzled. "Does it matter who hosts it? My martial arts skills are high. Why would I be afraid of this?" Zhang Pinger smiled bitterly and said, "Senior brother, although there was a test for alchemy disciples in the distant Fire Palace before, it was long ago. Your test is a special case. Therefore, there is no fixed method for how to test and how to prove that your martial arts are strong. Only the person who presides over the test has the right to decide what kind of test to do and how to pass. Don't you think that this is very dangerous? If it's eldest senior sister, it's fine. But if third senior sister is determined to make things difficult for you, then everything is unknown. Of course, this was Zhang Pinger's way of cheating. But it just so happened that she met with an accident. This obvious advantage immediately became a weakness that could be easily exploited. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and patted Zhang Pinger's shoulder again. She smiled and said, "It's all right. It's just a test. If I really fail, then I'll return to the pill hall and be a carefree little medicine boy." You. Zhang Pinger was speechless. She glared at Zhang Xiaohua, but didn't know what to say. She turned around and stomped her feet to leave. After Zhang Pinger left, Zhang Xiaohua also came to her senses. Didn't she spend so much effort to get you to come to the distant fire hall? If you say something to ease her heart and even add carefree, isn't this obviously trying to hurt her heart? Senior sister Zhang. Zhang Xiaohua called out and chased after her. In the distance, under the cover of a building, a pair of eyes stared at this scene. It was as if there was fire in his eyes. After Zhang Xiaohua had left, a handsome face appeared. Wasn't this the disciple of Emotian Palace, Yu Zhuochuan, that Zhang Xiaohua had met before? At this time, Yu Zhuochuan was holding a folding fan in his hand. He was dressed in a scholarly manner and had a threatening temperament. He was the image of an elegant young master. Looking at the place where Ling Qian disappeared, Yu Zhuochuan unconsciously revealed a cold smile. He casually drew 2 circles with the folding fan in his hand and jumped off the building. Following the bluestone road below, he walked straight in another direction. On the Lingxiang Peak, in the courtyard of Nanjing Fan, Peacock and Qin Chun were sitting cross-legged. They seemed to be discussing something. Beside the lotus pond, a girl in purple was fiddling with the lotus leaves in the pond, extremely bored. There wasn't much expression on her pale face. Only her slightly furrowed brows and empty eyes showed that this girl had a lot on her mind. Peacock and Qinshan said a few words and then stopped. They turned to look at the girl beside the lotus pond and whispered, "Qinshan, what's wrong with Zixia these days? She looks unhappy. What's the matter?" Qinshan also looked back and shook his head. "How would I know? After returning from the Yulan Dusk, this girl often came to find me. Maybe it's because we were close in the Yulong Grand Canyon and I protected her. But her face is just like what senior sister said, gloomier and gloomier by the day. It's as if someone owes her 3 bottles of Yuandan pill. She won't answer my questions." Zixia, Peacock said, "Come here. Senior sister Kong, you? Why did you call me?" Zixia didn't dare to delay. She quickly walked into the pavilion and asked carefully, "It's nothing much. You look so listless. Is there something troubling you?" Zixia's eyes flickered and she forced a smile. "Senior sister Kong, you're overthinking. What trouble? If there's something troubling me, why wouldn't I tell you? Senior sister Chan has been taking care of me." Qinshan waved his hand. "Zixia, you've been like this ever since you came back from the Yulan Dusk. You. Sai, what should I say about you? Some things can't be kept to yourself." Zixia panicked and quickly said, "No, I really don't." Peacock and Qinshan looked at each other and smiled bitterly. It was so obvious, and she still didn't say anything. "Sai, why are we worrying?" At this moment, a voice was heard, "Hey, Qinshan, it's rare that you're here today." "Zixia, you're here too?" It was Nun Jingfan's voice. The 3 of them didn't dare to delay. They quickly got up and greeted Nun Jingfan, who was walking over. Nun Jingfan waved her hand and asked them to sit down. She smiled and said, "Zixia hasn't been here for a long time. Are you absorbing the essence of the sky stalactite?" Zixia blushed and stole a glance at Qinshan. Qinshan didn't care. "What are you afraid of? I've already told Master. I'm sure the hierarch knows. Which disciple doesn't leave something good for themselves?" Zixia then said in a low voice, "Yes, Master Jingfan. My cultivation is still shallow. Of course, I want to improve my skills as soon as possible." Senior sister Jing Xian left early and didn't have time to guide you. Although this old one's mental cultivation method is different from senior sister Jing Xian's, it's more than enough to guide you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Zixia's face was filled with gratitude as she said, Senior Sister Chun has always taken care of me. I also often ask Senior Sister Chun for help when I have some difficulties in cultivation. Really? Nanjing Fan turned to look at Chen Chun. Of course. Chen Chun said proudly, I'm Zixia's senior sister. If I don't take care of her, who will? Yes, not bad. Little Chen Chun has finally grown up. Nanjing Fan was very pleased. She didn't frown and asked Zixia again. The hierarch suddenly issued a decree a few days ago. He wants a disciple of the Misty Hall in Serene Peak to be a registered disciple of Senior Sister Jingxian. Do you know about this? Zixia said respectfully, Of course I know. Then, did the hierarch say anything else? Like any explanation? Zixia hesitated. He didn't explain much. I'm also confused. But this is the hierarch's idea. I'll just listen. Yes, this is really strange. I also asked the hierarch. She only smiled and didn't say much. Seeing you here today, I thought of this. Oh, right, Peacock, Chin Chun. The ceremony of the heir selection has been brought forward to tomorrow. You should also prepare. What? Brought forward to tomorrow? Peacock and Chin Chun were surprised. The heir selection is a big event that happens once every 10 years. How can it be brought forward? Could it be that something has happened? Seeing the curiosity of her two disciples, Nanjing Fan smiled lovingly and said, It's not that big of a surprise. Although it was brought forward by a few days, there's no difference. Then, he thought for a moment and said, Actually, there are some reasons for this. Really? Then what's the reason? Chun Chen's eyes were already sparkling as he asked. It's strange. A few days ago, a disciple of the Emo Xian Palace was walking on the mountain path in the palace. Suddenly, lightning fell from the heavens and struck him into charcoal. Lightning from the heavens? Chin Chun said in disbelief, It's been sunny these days. How could there be lightning? Who knows? At that time, the disciple beside him said so. A golden lightning struck the disciple's head. The disciple didn't have any reaction and was immediately turned into charcoal. However, according to the disciple beside him, he didn't hear any lightning and it was sunny at that time. That disciple must have done something evil. That's why the god of thunder didn't like him and struck him to death with lightning. Chin Chun was very sure. Nanjing Fan smiled and said, Chin Chun, you should know this disciple. I know him? Chin Chun quickly waved his hand. I, Chin Chun, have a noble character. How could I know a disciple that even the heavens don't like? Then, he asked curiously, Right, is it a male or female disciple? -4. Chapter 843. That male disciple is the Zhong Pei that we talked about a few days ago. Zhong Pei? Oh, that Zhong Pei who was the deputy leader of Miao Shao Hall in Serene Peak? Chin Chun was surprised. Yes, that's him. Nanjing Fan confirmed. Serves him right. Chin Chun gritted his teeth and said, Although this guy is an inner disciple of Emosan Temple, his heart is really bad. He didn't do anything good in Serene Peak and only thought about how to harm the disciples of the Misty School. If it wasn't for his connivance, how could Zhao Jian have the guts to kill dozens of people? Look at that female disciple of Misty Hall called Xia Zai. She was tortured to such a state. How is she going to live the rest of her life? Nanjing Fan also sighed. That's right. That child is just in her 20s, just a little older than you. So, the heavenly thunder came at a good time. It should strike this guy alive. Chin Chun. Nanjing Fan frowned and said, Zhong Pei is the deputy hall chief of the Misty Hall. That's also the arrangement of His Excellency. Everything he does is also His Excellency's idea. Aren't you questioning His Excellency? Master, Chun Chun held Nanjing Fan's arm and said coquettishly, I didn't say anything about the leader. I only said that Zhong Pei did things without thinking about the consequences and didn't care about other people's lives. He deserves this retribution. Haha, Jing Fanshirt, I said with a laugh. Isn't that so? Several elders and consecrators also said the same thing. These past few days, Honorable Cult Leader has sealed off the news. In a few days, won't the entire Lingxiang Peak be spread? Peacock frowned and said, Master, this heavenly thunder. You also believe it? Ha ha, ha ha. Nanjing Fan also laughed. Follow the people's will. Follow the people's will. Zixia smiled at the side. Nanjing Fan's expression was very similar to Chen Qin's. Zixia finally knew why Chen Chun was so curious. Hearing Peacock say that it wasn't heavenly thunder, Zixia also became curious and couldn't help but ask, Senior Peacock, if it wasn't heavenly thunder, then what could it be? It could strike people into charcoal? Even if he's a top expert, he wouldn't have this kind of ability. Peacock looked at Zixia and then at Nanjing Fan. She smiled and said, Junior Martial Sister Zixia has only been in our fragrant religion for a short period of time and has not entered Mo Shui Palace, so there are many secrets in the religion that you do not know. This, Master, in fact, in my opinion, it seems to be the power of some magic tool. Jing Fan Nun also nodded slightly and said with a smile, Peacock's words do make some sense. Hierarch seems to have the same understanding, but the signs are similar to magic tools. But now, who can find such magic tools? And who can use this kind of magic tool? Magic weapon? Zixia's face was full of surprise. Martial uncle, what weapon is this? The person beside Qinshin quickly said, Zixia, don't ask if you don't understand. Didn't Senior Sister Peacock say that you haven't entered Mo Xian's palace? You can only listen to these things. If you ask too much, we won't know how to answer. Zixia nodded and did not say anything. Peacock pondered for a moment and said after a while, since the Tenryu sect, oh, no, the disciples of the Tenryu sect can use the sword aura. It can't be said that the sect has also received the inheritance of the way of immortality. It's possible that they have one or two magic tools of the way of immortality. Way of immortality? Zixia was even more surprised, but her little mouth was tightly shut and she was unwilling to ask another word. That's the problem. Since they have received the inheritance of the way of immortality and also obtained the magic tools of the way of immortality, why did they come to our fragrant religion? Why would they kill a third-rate inner disciple for no reason? But Master, I heard from the great elder that our fragrant religion has not been peaceful recently. The deputy leader of the Pill Opening Hall was killed and many disciples of the Baiyue Peak, Fuqiu Peak, Jihua Peak, and many other peaks lost their lives. In addition, thousands of people were killed by Yulan Mu. Do you think it has something to do with this? The deputy leader of the Pill Opening Hall was killed? Chen Shun was shocked. Why haven't I heard of it? That's a disciple of our Mo Xian Palace. Master Jing Fan nodded. Yes, the current Lingxiang Peak is indeed a bit like stagnant water with slight ripples. An undercurrent is brewing under the calm surface of the water, waiting for the right opportunity to stir up huge waves. It can't be, Master. What you said is too scary. Chen Shun pretended to be pitiful. Our fragrant religion has always been inconvenient to get in and out. Even the Lingxiang Peak has a peak protection array. Even if some people come in, they are far from being a match for us inner disciples. Oh, the peak protection array. Speaking of this, Qin Shun was shocked. Didn't the divine thunder that killed Zhong Pei pass through the peak protection array? Of course it broke through the peak protection array. Otherwise, the leader would have already searched the Lingxiang Peak. Jing Fan Nun said with a smile, although the situation in the cult is a bit abnormal, this godly thunder, let's call it godly thunder for the time being, according to the estimations of the cult leader and the previous elders, it has nothing to do with what's happening now. It's not even intentional. Huh? Chen Chen asked curiously, then what is it? It should be the brilliance of the magic weapon left by the predecessors of the fragrant religion outside the Lingxiang Peak when it is about to be unearthed. Magic weapon? Unearthed? Chun Chen's eyes were instantly filled with stars. He clapped his hands and said, Master, do you know where it is? What kind of magic weapon is it? Master Jing Fan shook her head. It's just a guess. We need to go and see to know. Who's going? Master, I want to go too. Maybe this magic weapon is fated to be with me. Chen Shun said with a smile. Don't be impatient. Master Jing Fan patted Chen Chen's shoulder and said, because we don't know where this divine thunder came from, and we don't know whether it is good or evil. Plus, the current situation in the fragrant religion is not peaceful. the leader discussed with the elders to bring forward the official selection to tomorrow. First, to choose the next leader, and second, to prepare to organize a few people to go out and search for traces of this magic weapon. I see. Peacock and Chin Chin looked at each other. They both understood. Master Jing Fan said again, the location of the official selection is the same as 10 years ago. It is still at the Refining Heart Cave in the west. Sai, I really want to tell you the key to this. Unfortunately, I didn't pass the test of the official selection, so I have nothing to tell you. Master, you should tell us how you failed. At least we can use it as a reference. Chen Chun said heartlessly. Sai, you child, what is there to say? Jing Fan Shirtai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Before I entered the cave, Master also said that there wasn't anything important. Even the other senior sisters who had passed through the Refining Heart Cave couldn't say anything. They only said that there were many reasons for failure, and everyone was different. After the principal selection, eldest senior sister, Lord Hierarch, and a few others passed. I also asked them, but they were also baffled. They couldn't explain it clearly, and even their explanations were different. In other words, every disciple who passed the Refining Heart Cave had a different reason for their success. Therefore, what others said was nonsense. It is still better to rely on one's own strength. But, Master, you should at least tell us what is in the Refining Heart Cave. It's nothing much. Inside the Refining Heart Cave is an illusory formation, an incomparably huge illusory formation. Every disciple will see and encounter different things when they enter. Only by relying on their own strength can they obtain the status of a direct disciple. Magic array? Zixia heard this and bit her lips. Is the magic array in the Refining Heart Cave as big as the protective array of our Lingxiang Peak? Chin Chin asked curiously. Master Jing Fan shook her head. How would I know? Even Lord Hierarch might not know about it. Since it is a magic array, then everything inside must be fake. I just don't believe it. How can we not get through it? Chin Chin frowned. Even Peacock had the same thought and nodded. How can it be as easy as you think? Master Jing Fan smiled bitterly. That magic array was set up by the immortals. Although its power has weakened, it is not as easy to deal with as you said. What is fake is real, and what is fake. Even in the mortal world, who can say that what they see in front of them is the so-called reality? Peacock and Chen Chun were confused, but Zixia was frowning. Moreover, this magic array is also a killing array. If one is not careful, it is very easy to be injured by the array inside. It is even possible to lose one's life. No one from Lingxiang Peak has passed the official selection for 50 years. There are also many outstanding disciples who died in the Refining Heart Cave. Otherwise, with Peacock's cultivation, it would be difficult for her to become the leader among the young disciples. In the end, Master Jing Fan said earnestly, therefore, no matter who you meet in the magic array, is all fake. You must not be soft-hearted. Be decisive. That is the only way to save your life. Decisively? Peacock and Chen Shan were confused, but they still said solemnly, yes, Master, we will remember. Well, that's good. Although there is only one chance in the official selection, if you don't pass, you won't be a candidate for the sect leader. But your life is the most important. Tomorrow. Understood, Master. We will definitely prioritize our lives. We have been hearing this for the past few days. Chinchin pouted and said, your life is the most important. Master, even if you say it 10,000 times, it will not be too much. At the same time, in the Lihua Temple, in a remote room, Zhang Xiaohua was sitting cross-legged. He was making gestures with his hands. From time to time, he would cast a spell. His body was sometimes bright and sometimes dark. One could vaguely see that he had improved a lot compared to when he was at Shixin Peak. The next morning, early in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua had just finished practicing the Fist of the North Star when he saw Zhang Pinger angrily walking towards him. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised and asked loudly, Junior sister, why are you angry? Did the dining room not prepare breakfast for you? A smile immediately blossomed on Zhang Pinger's ice-cold face. However, she immediately regained her ice-cold expression. She said, even at a time like this, senior brother is still in the mood to joke around? Isn't it just a martial arts test? What is there to be nervous about? But, senior brother, third senior sister, she's gone too far. -4. Chapter 844. Too much. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised and pretended to be angry. Did your third senior sister give me an impossible task? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's exaggerated expression, Zhang Pinger's heart relaxed and said, "It's not impossible. If it's impossible, why would she ask you to do it? Then what is it?" Zhang Xiaohua was still smiling. "This. I don't know for the time being," Zhang Pinger said without thinking. Bang! Zhang Xiaohua fell to the ground and muttered after a long time. "Since you don't know, how can you say it's too much?" "Senior brother, although I don't know what your task is, I know where you are going." Zhang Pinger's face was full of disappointment as she said, "I asked third senior sister yesterday, but she wouldn't tell me no matter what. Today, early in the morning, when she had to send orders to prepare, she told me the location of the test." "Oh, where is it? Is it a dragon's pool or a tiger's den?" Zhang Xiaohua curiously asked. "Third senior sister arranged for you to test in the Ghost Valley." Zhang Pinger angrily said. "Ghost Valley?" Zhang Xiaohua was even more surprised and asked, "Where is this Ghost Valley? Why haven't I heard of it?" "If senior brother has heard of it, then it's a strange thing." Zhang Pinger sneered. "This Ghost Valley is in a canyon under the Fire Palace's mountain. Only the Fire Palace's disciples know about it. Even the other inner disciples don't know about it. So it's like this, but why is it called Ghost Valley? Is there a ghost inside?" Zhang Xiaohua probed. "How can there be a ghost? If there is a ghost, wouldn't there be a god in this world?" Zhang Pinger laughed and then explained. "Speaking of this Ghost Valley, it's a long time ago. According to the records of the distant Fire Temple, this canyon was not called the Ghost Valley in the past, but the Emerald Tree Valley. It is a place with beautiful scenery, lush vegetation, and all kinds of spirit herbs grow in clusters. It seems to be even more beautiful than the strange birch forest in the Yulon Grand Canyon. In the past, the Evergreen Valley was very suitable for growing spiritual herbs. Therefore, many of the Li Hua Palace's spiritual herbs were planted in the valley. Many of the disciples were also assigned to the Evergreen Valley. All the disciples loved to go there. Even the disciples from the other palaces and the disciples from Nong Palace often came there. However, about 1,000 years ago, I don't know what happened to the Li Chui Valley, but there was an inexplicable black fog inside. This black fog was not much, but it was not little either. All the spiritual herbs and trees were polluted and could no longer grow. The regenerated spiritual herbs and trees were gloomy and could no longer be used for medicine or alchemy. Even the stones in the Li Chui Valley lost their previous green appearance and became a dark blue color. The entire Li Chui Valley looked like there was a ghost, and all the disciples no longer went there to pick herbs and play. Over time, the name was changed to Ghost Valley. "Oh, so it's like this." Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. Since it was Ghost Valley, of course there were unknown dangers, and third senior sister Mei Suiying wanted her to go to Ghost Valley for the test. "But, since it's Ghost Valley, what is there for me to look for?" "Senior brother, you may not know, but after the spiritual herbs and trees in Ghost Valley were polluted by the ghost fog, it was naturally impossible to refine ordinary pills. But what about it? After the research of several generations of seniors in the Fire Palace, they found that some spiritual herbs, such as ghost face mushroom, ghost shadow grass, ghost eye fruit, have new uses, such as using poison or using poison to fight poison. Moreover, some animals and unknown herbs in Ghost Valley also have an incredible effect. Presumably, third senior sister wants you to go to Ghost Valley to look for these strange things." Haha, Zhang Xiaohua heard and unconsciously laughed. Since some seniors have already entered Ghost Valley, even if there is danger, it should be limited. Moreover, your third senior sister's request is normal. If I lose, she will naturally succeed, and if I win, she will get the pills. She has the idea of having the best of both worlds. How can it be as simple as senior brother thinks? Zhang Pinger said. What I said was something that happened hundreds of years ago. Because Ghost Valley has been shrouded in ghost fog for a long time. Although it is not much, ordinary people are extremely unaccustomed to it. Very few people can stay in it for more than 4 hours. Many people have gone crazy after entering Ghost Valley. So, in the past 100 years, no one has entered again. Alas, Zhang Xiaohua sighed, looked at Zhang Pinger and said, I'm a fish on the chopping block. If I don't want to listen to your third senior sister's arrangement, I can only go back to the pill hall. Sigh. Zhang Pinger also sighed, and then complained, Master is really too much. That night, didn't she agree to let eldest senior sister conduct a martial arts test for you? I thought that eldest senior sister would at most exchange a few moves with you. At the very least, she would find a few disciples from the Rue Jean Palace Hall to test your martial arts with you. I don't know what the two of them are busy with. I can't see them all day, so. Then, she lowered her head and said softly, Please don't blame me, senior brother. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, What's there to blame? I was the one who mocked your third senior sister that day. How can I blame you? Just as they were talking, a disciple hurried over, looked at Zhang Pinger and cupped his hands, and said respectfully, Senior Sister Zhang, Senior Sister Mei asked me to inform Junior Brother Ren that the test in Lai Chui Valley will begin in half an hour. Please ask Junior Brother Ren to hurry to the entrance of the valley in the west as soon as possible. Zhang Pinger waved her hand and said, Okay, I got it. You go back and report first. I will take Junior Brother Ren there in a while. After the disciple walked away, Zhang Pinger looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said, Senior brother, are you ready? Do you have anything to take? Zhang Xiaohua shook his head and said, There's nothing to take. Let's go. You don't need to bring a weapon? Zhang Pinger was worried and said, I remember that senior brother has a short sword, right? Short sword? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned, scratching his head and said, I think I lost it. Then, he pretended to be enlightened and said, That's right. Don't I have a long sword? Wait a moment. After saying that, he went into the small house and after a while, he walked out with the great wisdom sword. Zhang Pinger had never seen this heavy sword before and frowned. Senior brother, is this your long sword? I seem to have seen your mount before. I thought it was a stick. Zhang Xiaohua raised the great wisdom sword, waved it a few times, and said with a smile, It's just convenient to use. Just treat it as a long sword. The two talked as they walked, and by the time they arrived at the Li Chui Valley, which was west of the Li Hua Hall, half an hour had passed. At this time, there were many disciples gathered at the entrance of the valley, and Zhang Xiaohua saw the third senior sister a few days ago, standing there in a fiery red robe. The entrance of the Li Chui Valley was behind a pile of rocks and messy vegetation, so Zhang Xiaohua could not see clearly. The entire valley seemed to be wrapped around the lingering fragrance peak, and the peak of the lingering fragrance peak blocked Zhang Xiaohua's line of sight. When they got close, Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Pinger bowed to Mei Suiying. Mei Suiying waved her hand and said, Junior Brother Ren, I think you already know that because senior sister has an important matter to attend to, the matter of testing your martial arts has been left to me. Originally, you were disrespectful to me that day, and I wanted to teach you a lesson. If it were up to me, I would have invited a senior sister from Emotian's palace, and you would have been dealt with in a few moves. But before senior apprentice sister left, she repeatedly instructed me to find some simple tests for you. Moreover, in my Lihua Palace Hall's Dan refining room, due to the lack of Li Chui Valley's medicinal herbs, we haven't refined any strange medicinal pills for a long time. Since junior sister Zhang said that your martial arts are outstanding, then that's good. I'll find a simple test for you. As long as you find a 1,000-year-old ghost face mushroom in this Li Chui Valley, I'll consider it as a pass. How about it? 1,000-year-old? Before Zhang Xiaohua could speak, Zhang Pinger beside her cried out, Third senior sister, this ghost face valley has a 1,000-year-old ghost face mushroom? This ghost face valley has only been formed for a few years. Mei Suiying smiled tenderly and said, Seventh junior sister, as a senior sister, I'm a good-for-nothing. I only know how to cultivate, and I'm not interested in the records of this palace hall. Therefore, I don't know that this Li Chui Valley is called Ghost Face Valley. I only know that this Li Chui Valley has existed for more than 10,000 years. Although it's rare to find a 1,000-year-old ghost face mushroom, in this Li Chui Valley, there should be a limit to how difficult it is. You. Zhang Pinger was flustered and exasperated. You're deliberately making things difficult for me. Deliberately making things difficult? Mei Suiying snorted disdainfully and said, I'm the most impartial. Since eldest senior sister has taught me this matter, I will definitely complete it well. Moreover, if I don't find something slightly more difficult, what if the hierarch lord finds out that I easily let go of the probationary disciple that she wants to strictly test? How do you want me to tell the hierarch lord? This? Zhang Pinger was speechless. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, All right, third. Senior sister, I've already prepared everything. When should I enter? Mei Suiying smiled and said, Junior brother Ren is indeed a hero. You're worthy of being the person who passed through the Orchid Dusk refinement. This Li Chui Valley's entrance is already open. You can enter at any time. Moreover, I'll send someone to wait at the entrance. As long as you pick a ghost face mushroom, you can come back at any time. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, Many thanks for senior sister's arrangement. After he finished speaking, he held his sword and walked towards the entrance of the Lichen Valley. Mas, junior brother Ren, be careful. If there's any danger, it's better if you come out early. Zhang Pinger chased after him and said in a low voice. Zhang Xiaohua turned around and smiled. Don't worry, senior martial sister Zhang. I'll be back soon. After he finished speaking, he entered the dark valley. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua enter, Zhang Pinger stared at the entrance of the valley. After a while, she heard Mei Suiying say with a smile, Seventh junior sister, come over here. I have something to tell you. Hearing this, Zhang Pinger turned around and walked over. Senior sister, what's the matter? Just as Zhang Pinger turned around, a pale white figure jumped up from the tree beside the Emerald Lily Valley. While all the disciples were looking at Zhang Pinger, the figure disappeared into the valley in a flash. -4. Chapter 845. At the same time that Zhang Xiaohua entered the Emerald Lily Valley, at the western foot of the lingering fragrance peak, there were a dozen masked women dressed in palace attire standing in a strange arrangement. They were standing in a rather large area. In the middle of them was a stone tablet that protruded from the ground. The stone tablet wasn't big, but there were strange patterns engraved on it. The sun that was high up in the sky was shining its light on the stone tablet. Under the sunlight, the patterns on the stone tablet were faintly visible, as if they were swimming. Around the stone tablet, there were 3 masked women who were also dressed in palace attire sitting cross-legged. However, their hair was already pure white, giving them a youthful appearance. The 3 women placed their hands in front of their chests. Their fingers were either bent or straight, and they were in the same position as Zhang Xiaohua when she was forming hand seals. However, their fingers were just standing there, not moving at all. Behind the 3 women was another woman dressed in palace attire. She stood there majestically with her eyes closed. Suddenly, the woman who was standing there opened her eyes. She raised her head to look at the sky and said, 3 elders, it's time. Open the refining heart cave. Yes, Lord Sect Leader. The 3 of them said in unison. At the same time, the 3 of them also extended their hands into their bosoms. Each of them took out a small stone and held it in their hands. Their previously frozen fingers began to twitch at this moment. Not long after, a faint red light rose from their right hands. The light grew brighter and brighter as time passed. When the brilliance reached a certain size, the 3 of them raised their heads and looked at each other. Then, they threw the brilliance in their fingers forward, hitting the stone tablet in the middle of the 3 of them. Just when the brilliance in their hands hit the stone tablet, there was a hua sound. It was as if firewood had been ignited. The entire stone tablet immediately emitted a dazzling green brilliance. Following the brilliance, the patterns on the stone tablet seemed to have come to life and really started to move. As the patterns moved, the stone tablet gradually became transparent until it finally disappeared. At the place where the stone tablet disappeared, there was a 3-foot circle of light. The green brilliance came from within the circle of light. After a long while, the circle of light gradually stabilized. Even the patterns were steadily moving above the circle of light. Seeing this scene, the 3 old women let out a long breath. Looking at the stone in their hands that had shrunk a lot, they said in a low voice, Lord Sect Leader, fortunately, we didn't disappoint you. Good. All of you step to the side. With that, the hierarch walked forward and carefully looked at it. He nodded in satisfaction and turned to the dozen or so young female disciples with their faces covered. Okay, the main selection that happens once every 10 years is about to begin. In the past 50 years, our lingering fragrance peak hasn't been able to select a disciple that can inherit the position of hierarch. I hope that this time, you can live up to the expectations of the thousands of disciples in Emotion Palace and pass the test of the refining heart cave. Then we will select a few disciples that have the qualifications to inherit the position. Then, she paused and raised her voice. Although our Emotion Palace's secret inheritance room is gradually disappearing, even if all 18 of you can pass the refining heart cave, the secret inheritance room will still provide enough space for you. So, you don't have to worry. Take out your most powerful techniques and use your martial arts to prove that you are the most outstanding disciples of Emotion Palace. Yes, we will obey the Lord Sect leader's orders. The 18 disciples said in unison with great momentum. When the Lord Sect leader heard this, her expression under the veil was unknown. She turned around and reached into her bosom to take out a palm-sized jade tablet. Her right hand also moved and formed a seal like Zhang Xiaohua. The Lord Sect leader's technique was much more skillful than Zhang Xiaohua's. When the hierarch was done with the incantation, he raised his hand and a green brilliance hit the light circle. Immediately, the light circle began to ripple. Then, the hierarch took out the jade token in his other hand and drew an arc in the air, landing on the rippling light circle. Like an ice cube falling into a fire, the jade token gradually melted. As the jade token melted, the light circle around the jade token gradually disappeared, and a pitch-black hole appeared. The hole grew bigger and bigger, and finally, the entire light circle became a pitch-black hole. Following that, with a pong sound, a bunch of fireworks flew out from the cave entrance and landed on the heads of the 18 female disciples standing at the back. Then, they disappeared. Okay, the refining heart cave has been opened. Disciples, you can go in. The Lord Sect leader's tone was still dignified. She said, I think your master has already told you about the matters in the refining heart cave. There is nothing to pay attention to. Just follow your heart and rely on your own ability to pass. Chin, you go first. Peacock goes last. The other disciples will follow the order and enter one by one. Yes, Lord Sect leader. A female disciple in green walked out from the crowd and walked to the left side of the cave. She leaped up slightly and drew a beautiful arc in the air before entering the refining heart cave. Following that, each disciple entered the cave. Everyone's qigong was different, but they were all graceful. Only the peacock, who was wearing a pink palace dress, was the last to enter the cave. She was neither slow nor fast, neither hurried nor rushed. It was as if she was jumping a rubber band. With a small jump, she crossed the fluttering patterns and entered the dark cave. After the 18 disciples entered the refining heart cave, the Lord Sect leader coughed and said, Elders, how long can the primordial stones in your hands last? An old voice said, Lord Sect leader, if there are no accidents, we should be able to use it 2 more times. Sigh. The Lord Sect leader nodded and then sighed. We don't have much time left. Another voice sounded. Lord Sect leader, in recent years, I have felt that the Lingxiang Peak's yuan qi has become slightly more abundant. There must be a great change in the world. Perhaps, the Lord Sect leader nodded and then shook his head. Elder is right. There is indeed a change. Otherwise, our Jinghua Lake's passageway would not be stable. It's just that the Lingxiang Peak's yuan qi is still thin and cannot support our cultivation. Moreover, the primordial stones used to power the array are about to be used up. Although the Lingxiang Peak's yuan qi has changed, distant water cannot quench present thirst. Where can we find primordial stones to use? Then, he said thoughtfully, no one from Emotion Gong has passed the selection for 50 years. This time, these 18 disciples, what do you think? The 3 women looked at each other, and one of them said, based on the way they entered the cave, their lightness skills are very good. But, in terms of mentality, they are still lacking. It seems like only Peacock in the end has some confidence. Sigh, that's right. The refining heart cave refines the heart. Although martial arts is important, the most important thing is the state of mind. These children are all geniuses. How would they know the difficulties? However, the state of mind depends on the individual. Even if we explain it to them clearly, it will be useless. Instead, it will have a negative effect. Peacock's state of mind is fine, but her martial arts cultivation is still lacking. Moreover, this child's background is somewhat miserable. It is hard to guarantee that there will not be a crack in her heart. For this specific test, it is also a fatal flaw. Let's leave it to the heavens. This is all we can do. Perhaps after a few hundred years, our fragrant sect will be like the Misty school and the Shindao sect. We will all go into decline. The Lord's sect leader was somewhat depressed. The three elders looked at each other and did not say anything. Peacock was the last to jump into the refining heart cave. Once she jumped, she felt that there was starlight in front of her. However, there was nothing under her feet. She kept falling. Io, what should we do? The lower I fall, the faster I fall. There is no place for me to grab onto. Won't I turn into a meat patty in the end? Peacock was flustered. Then, she thought, Master said to only rely on the mind. There is no need to worry about it. I have never heard of anyone falling to their death in the refining heart cave. Sure enough, once this thought came to her mind, Peacock's falling speed slowed down. Peacock had the time to look at her surroundings. This was an illusory space. The sky was filled with stars. Beneath her feet were also stars. Peacock was the only one in this space. She could not see the other 17 sisters who had entered before her. Not only that, Peacock was suspended in the air. It was as if she was flying. Peacock saw everything clearly. She was shocked. Is this the technique of the immortal path? Just as this thought came to her mind, a figure appeared in front of her eyes. Master? Peacock cried out. Peacock, remember what I said. In this refining heart cave, what is real is fake and what is fake is real. Only by keeping your mind to yourself will you have a chance to break out of the illusion. As soon as he finished speaking, the figure turned into specks of light and disappeared without a trace. Peacock did not know how to face it. Is this Master? Did she have such great divine power? However, if it wasn't Master, who would repeat what he said to me yesterday? That's right. Yesterday Abbess Jingfan had warned Peacock that the refining heart cave was an illusory array. Everything inside was fake. But these fake things were often the trial taker's own inner demons. They were the reflection of their true desires. If they wanted to break out of the refining heart cave, then they would have to kill their own inner demons and break through the illusory array. Perhaps this is the effect of the illusion. Peacock was enlightened. This was what Jingfan Nun had told her the other day. Peacock remembered it well. Once she entered the illusion, it was revealed. But what is my inner demon? Peacock thought to herself. Before she knew it, her feet had stopped moving. It was as if she was standing on solid ground. At the same time, the space in front of Peacock shook and collapsed. The scene that appeared in front of Peacock made her furious. -4. Chapter 846. In front of Peacock was a quaint, tranquil little courtyard with a pond of lotus flowers, a few ducks and a bed of peonies on the bank. Peacock's heart thumped wildly at the sight. Just as she was about to take a step forward, something even more shocking happened. She suddenly realized that she was no longer the young woman from before, but a little girl with small arms and legs. When she reached the pond, was the reflection of a little girl? Have I returned to the past? However, before Peacock could think of this, an even more terrifying thought suddenly intruded. Could it be that bloody afternoon? Peacock's childish little face immediately turned pale. If her memory served her right, in another 2 hours, her gentle and polite father would return from outside reeking of alcohol. This time, he would no longer call Peacock by her pet name and play with her as usual. Her father, who had a rough career ahead of him, would arrive at the Silver Hook Casino 5 miles away and sell this ancestral house, Peacock's mother, and even Peacock to someone else. Peacock watched as her mother, who loved her dearly, fell into the pond in front of her. After her father sobered up, He was even more remorseful and slammed his head against a pillar to commit suicide. A perfect family was destroyed in an instant. Peacock cried and screamed as she was taken away by the casino's thugs. She was caught halfway when she tried to escape and was almost beaten to death. However, she met Abishjingfan and was brought to Lingering Fragrance Peak. These were the secrets hidden deep in Peacock's heart. Apart from Abishjingfan, His Eminence, and a few other people, even Chen Shen, did not know. The trauma of her childhood had long been buried deep in Peacock's heart, and she never wanted to think of it again. However, it was here, inadvertently and inevitably, it appeared in front of Peacock's eyes. Swoosh! Peacock's face was covered in sweat. Reliving the tragedy of her childhood made her feel like she had a sudden epiphany. Then, another absurd thought rose in her mind. Can I stop this tragedy from happening? With this in mind, Peacock immediately moved her little legs and ran toward the greenhouse. In her memory, her mother was brewing her favorite nail polish in the greenhouse. As expected, when Peacock pushed open the greenhouse door and saw the face of her mother that she had not seen for many years, she immediately burst into tears and threw herself at her mother. Peacock's mother was even more surprised. She carefully hugged Peacock and tried her best to comfort her. After a long while, Peacock stopped crying and pulled her mother to look for her father. However, Peacock's mother did not know where her husband was. If it was any other day, she would have made excuses and stayed at home with her child to play. But this time, no matter what she did, she could not stop Peacock. Under Peacock's lead, they walked for a full 5 miles and finally arrived at the Silverhook Casino. They found her father, who was about to be dragged into the casino by a group of people after he had drunk some wine. The rest of the story was even more natural. Everything was changed by Peacock. Peacock's father became a high-ranking official, and the whole family became more prosperous. Peacock herself became a famous figure, and finally married a famous scholar, and gave birth to a son and daughter. Peacock, the most promising candidate for the Lingering Fragrance Peak's Emotian Gong. Once she entered the Refining Heart Cave, she immediately fell into an illusion. Her mind was lost, and while she was enjoying the world, she had forgotten everything. She only knew how to be a good wife to her husband and children. At the entrance of Lai Chui Valley, Zhang Xiaohua was bold and did not speak much with Mei Suying. She held the Great Wisdom Sword and entered the Haunted Valley. Outside of the Ghost Valley, there was not much feeling. The entrance of the valley was cold and cheerless, without any greenery. After entering the Ghost Valley, a chilly aura hit their faces, causing them to shiver a few times. Zhang Xiaohua stopped and looked up. Wasn't it just as Zhang Pinger said? The scenery inside the Haunted Valley was completely different from the beautiful scenery outside. The ground and rocks in the Haunted Valley were dark brown. The trees that grew on the ground were also very short. Most of them were about the height of a person. The branches and leaves on the trees were grayish-brown, as if there was a layer of dust. The grass on the ground was replaced by mushrooms. The dark brown crown and grayish-white stem looked very eerie. Occasionally, one could see herbs growing between the mushrooms. The herbs were green with a tinge of black, and the fruits on the top of the herbs were either gray, black, or dark red. One look, and one could tell that they were not materials used for alchemy. In addition to these, the most eye-catching thing was the grayish-black clouds floating in the Haunted Valley. These clouds were different from the ones Zhang Xiaohua saw at the top of Shixin Peak. The clouds there were bundles and piles. Here, the grayish-black clouds were wisps and streaks. However, most of these clouds gathered on the ground and wrapped around the herbs and trees. Zhang Xiaohua had already been warned by Zhang Pinger. She only took a breath. When she smelled a rotten stench in the Haunted Valley, she immediately stopped breathing and silently operated the Worry-Free Heart Sutra to operate the genuine qi in her body. Zhang Xiaohua observed the scene in the Haunted Valley. She walked along the path of the Haunted Valley. Because the herbs and mushrooms here were different from those outside the Haunted Valley, Zhang Xiaohua was also curious and picked some as she walked. After walking for a while, she saw more trees and more haunted fog. Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense. The haunted fog was a strange thing. In her divine sense, she could faintly feel the fluctuation of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. But if she carefully identified it, It was very different from the haunted fog that Zhang Xiaohua had refined before. If she forced herself to compare, it was somewhat similar to the haunted fog in the cave that Zhang Xiaohua had mistakenly entered on the way to the incense cult. Of course, it was only similar. Just based on Zhang Xiaohua's senses, she knew that it was very different. After seeing more haunted fog, Zhang Xiaohua unconsciously became more careful. Her footsteps slowed down, and she became more careful when picking herbs and wild mushrooms. After walking for a while, she saw that she had arrived at a gentle slope. The haunted fog below the slope was even more dense. At a glance, she could not see through it. Zhang Xiaohua also unconsciously stopped. Along the way, she also picked some wild mushrooms. Of course, there were also the ghost-faced mushrooms that Zhang Pinger had told her about outside the haunted valley. Unfortunately, even Zhang Xiaohua herself knew that the ghost-faced mushrooms that she had picked before were only 10 years old, or even a few years old. It was not even close to the 1,000-year-old ghost-faced mushrooms that Mei Sujin had requested. If she wanted to complete Mei Sujin's task, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to walk to this gentle slope. She walked to a place where the haunted fog was denser. However, Zhang Xiaohua stood quietly on the gentle slope and did not move. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly turned around and sneered at a short tree. "This masked brother, shouldn't you have come out earlier?" Ha ha ha. After hearing Zhang Xiaohua's words, a white figure walked out from the tree. Zhang Xiaohua's expression did not change. She smiled and said, "This brother seems to be very confident in your qigong. You are actually wearing a white robe while following behind me. Don't tell me you don't know that everything in Li Chui Valley is gray?" The figure walked to the front and stood in the distance. He was about the same height as Zhang Xiaohua. The eyes that were exposed outside the mask were slightly squinted. His white robe was particularly eye-catching in this gray-black forest. The person laughed and said, "I didn't expect this little brother to be so vigilant. I was already very careful, but I was still discovered by you." Zhang Xiaohua sneered, "Brother, why are you following me? Are you waiting for me to drop some copper coins?" The person looked at Zhang Xiaohua with amusement. "Little brother, in this windy haunted valley, in this cold haunted fog, what do you think I can do by following you? If little brother has some copper coins to drop, that would be the best. Next year on this day, I will also make some paper money and burn it for you. What do you think? Are you that confident, Senior Yu Zhuochuan?" Zhang Xiaohua licked her lips and looked at the person's mask with interest. "Humph, I knew it. What's the use of wearing a mask?" Yu Zhuochuan took off the mask and stuffed it into his chest. He then said, "Ren Xiaoyao, your eyes are quite sharp. You can actually tell that it's me? Why don't you think it's Yin Jianhan? I remember that Yin Jianhan dragged you over yesterday and gave you a good beating. Hee. Don't tell me that the two of you have already buried the hatchet." Yu Zhuochuan looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said frivolously, "Zhang Pinger is a beautiful woman. Do you think Yin Jianhan will give her to you so easily? That's not something senior brother you should worry about." Zhang Xiaohua sneered and said, "Whether senior sister Zhang is a beautiful woman or not is not something senior you can find out in the future. Ioyo, junior brother Rin, you are so arrogant. You really scared me." Yu Zhuochuan patted his chest and shouted exaggeratedly, "Luckily, the wind in Ghost Valley is not strong. Otherwise, junior brother Ren's tongue would have been blown off. Let the wind blow harder." Zhang Xiaohua shouted to the sky, "Blow off my tongue." Ha ha ha. Yu Zhuochuan laughed and said, "Junior brother Ren, don't waste your time. No one has come to Ghost Valley for so many years. Even if you shout until your throat breaks, no one will hear you." "Is that so?" Zhang Xiaohua heard and smiled mysteriously. "This is a good place to silence people. No wonder senior brother you wants to come. Could it be that you have the same idea as me?" "Junior brother Ren, you are indeed a bold and skillful person." Yu Zhuochuan also smiled and gave him a thumbs up. Or should I say, the ignorant are fearless. To be praised by this senior brother, even if you die here, you can rest assured. -4. Chapter 847. I wouldn't dare. Humph, junior brother Ren is talking so much with me. Could it be that you still have delusions in your heart? Yu Zhuochuan said with a smile. Since I have already shown my true face, I have already made preparations to silence you. Junior brother Rin, save your strength. You may be able to withstand a few moves. Oh, right. I still have to advise junior brother Rin. You'd better kill yourself. This way I can leave you with an intact corpse. If you let me pull out my sword, hee, it's possible that I'll cut you into 70 or 80 pieces, or even chop you into minced meat and feed it to the dogs. Ouch! Zhang Xiaohua shivered, as if he was having a cold war, and said with a trembling voice, You really need to do this? There really is nothing between me and senior sister Zhang. What's the point of saying this now? Yu Zhuochuan sneered. Do you want to do it yourself? Or do you want me to do it? Zhang Xiaohua said with a smirk. Ouch, wouldn't it be very painful if I did it myself? I've been afraid of pain since I was young. Let's forget about it. How about I trouble you to come and take my life? Then he thought for a moment and slightly frowned. Also, this little brother's meat doesn't taste good. Please don't let any wild dogs eat it. I remember that last time, Lord Chen Chun came to Shirxin Peak to deal with a guy called Zhao Jian, saying that he was going to cut him into pieces and feed him to wild dogs. Oh my, where did Chuanxiang cult see wild dogs? How do you want to feed them? Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of panic, but his mouth was still laughing. How was he at the end of the road? This caused Yu Zhuochuan to be extremely bewildered. While she was puzzled, she also became extremely vigilant. She circulated her energy to the extreme and observed the surrounding situation with her eyes. It was no different from usual. She couldn't see any helpers. Could it be? This guy is a great master? Yu Zhuochuan looked at the fearless Zhang Xiaohua, and this thought quietly rose in his heart. But then he immediately denied it. How is that possible? Even if this guy had practiced internal strength since he was a child, he still wouldn't be my opponent, let alone an alchemy boy from the Pill Tower Hall. It was said that a few years ago, there was also a disciple from the Pill Tower Hall who was given an internal strength mental cultivation method by the inner gate and entered the Woming Hall. Was this guy the same as that disciple? Alas, even if it's the same, he still died in my hands. Yes, it must be a stalling tactic. Yu Zhuochuan was similarly confident. She reached out her hand and pulled out a long sword that was shining brightly from her waist. She said with a smile, Since junior brother Rin is so polite, I will make the first move. As he spoke, he thrust his sword forward and executed his movement technique. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and raised her heavy sword to meet the long sword in front of her. With a clang, the long sword was knocked far away. Zhang Xiaohua's heavy sword did not lose its momentum and continued to smash towards Yu Zhuochuan's chest. Ouch! Yu Zhuochuan exclaimed. She did not expect that her first attack would be blocked. She immediately turned back and executed her lightness skill to avoid the attack. She saw that she was in the air and said, Ren Xiaoyao, I didn't expect you to have some skills. You actually hid some of your strength. Before her voice died away, the long sword in her hand was thrust towards Zhang Xiaohua's throat. Haha, it's more than just some skills. You see, I, Xiaoxia, will definitely not let you go back today. Ha ha ha. A laugh more arrogant than Zhang Xiaohua sounded. If you want to take my life, then I'm not looking down on you. You still have to practice for 100 years. The long sword was like frost, and it flashed with sword light. Yu Zhuochuan held the long sword in her hand and raised her spirit. She used her exquisite sword skill and stabbed towards Zhang Xiaohua's body. Zhang Xiaohua laughed inwardly. Holding the heavy sword in his hand, he also used the nameless sword skill skillfully and blocked the attacks. Zhang Xiaohua's sword skill was not as good as Yu Zhuochuan's, but his strength was great. As long as Yu Zhuochuan's long sword touched the heavy sword, even if there was a slight distance between it and the heavy sword, it would immediately be swept away. After a few moves, Yu Zhuochuan no longer had the idea of fighting force with force. She only looked for flaws in Zhang Xiaohua's sword skills. After fighting for a while, Zhang Xiaohua was getting impatient. He was an immortal qi practitioner, and sword skills were not his forte. With his great strength, he could only bully ordinary people. Although it was not difficult to deal with Yu Zhuochuan, it would take time. He heard from Zhang Pinger that it was best not to stay in the Ghost Valley for too long. He still had to pick the ghost face mushrooms. It was unreasonable to waste time here with Yu Zhuochuan. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua stabbed the heavy sword into the ground and took out Chasing Dream from his chest. Haha, Yu Zhuochuan saw this and laughed loudly. There's that brat. Is your sword skill not a match for this young master? You actually took out a little girl's small sword. Looks like you really are. You're someone from the Tenryu sect? Yu Zhuochuan was mocking him at first, but when he saw the Chasing Dream dagger rise into the air and fly towards his throat like a nimble little snake, he finally came to his senses and cried out, "This!" After that, he didn't say anything else and immediately leaped backwards, looking as if he was about to escape. Zhang Xiaohua was also very surprised. He thought to himself, this Yu Zhuochuan is quite a character. Once he saw the flying sword, he immediately knew that he was no match for it. He was not willing to stay any longer. Unfortunately, since Yu Zhuochuan already had the intention to kill Zhang Xiaohua, and Zhang Xiaohua had also taken out his flying sword, how could there be any room for reconciliation between the two of them? Zhang Xiaohua rode on the wind, and in the blink of an eye, she overtook Yu Zhuochuan. She pointed her finger, and the Chasing Dream was still stabbing towards his throat. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua flying in the air and blocking in front of him, Yu Zhuochuan was not surprised and quickly used his long sword to block the flying sword. However, the flying sword was like a meteor and he could not block it at all. After blocking a few moves, it cut open a wound on his forehead. Since this was the case, Yu Zhuochuan did not dare to stay any longer. He gritted his teeth and reached into his chest and took out an unknown item. He shook his hand and threw it towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was releasing her divine sense and saw clearly that it was a light golden jade talisman. How does this guy have an immortal jade talisman? Zhang Xiaohua could not help but be shocked. Even Peacock and Qin Shun don't have it. How did he? But at this time, the jade talisman was already in front of her. Zhang Xiaohua did not have time to think and immediately reached into her chest and grabbed a defensive jade talisman. Without waiting for her hand to take it out, she crushed it. The golden jade talisman that Yu Zhuochuan threw was in front of Zhang Xiaohua and suddenly exploded. With a sizzle sound, dozens of golden dots sprang out, and these golden dots grew with the wind. In a flash, they turned into dozens of golden long swords and uniformly covered Zhang Xiaohua's head. Good. What kind of offensive jade talisman is this? Zhang Xiaohua thought as she rode on the wind, trying to escape the attack range of the golden long swords. Zhang Xiaohua's imperial wind technique could not be said to be slow, but just as she escaped the attack of the long swords immediately changed their direction and stabbed towards Zhang Xiaohua, who had already escaped to the side. At this time, the jade talisman that Zhang Xiaohua had just crushed also took effect. A light green light shield also rose around Zhang Xiaohua, but Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to be careless. She still released her divine sense and carefully observed. Moreover, her other hand was still in her chest and did not take it out. As expected, when the golden long swords pierced into Zhang Xiaohua's light green light shield, the light shield shook for a while. When the golden long swords were destroyed, the light shield also dimmed a lot. But after a few more long swords pierced in, the light shield was about to be destroyed. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to be careless. She crushed another defensive jade talisman and another light shield appeared. Not far away, Yu Zhuochuan threw out her jade talisman. She did not stop and continued to run. However, as she ran, she stole a glance behind her. She saw Zhang Xiaohua being attacked by the golden longsword and was somewhat flustered. A trace of joy appeared on her face. The dimming of the light shield made her stop in her tracks. But when he saw another light shield rise, he did not dare to stay any longer and turned to run. When Zhang Xiaohua saw that the defensive light shield was effective, she could not help but feel relieved. She still had a lot of jade talismans with her. Why should she be afraid of him? Hence, she looked at Yu Zhuochuan, who was running away. This guy knows how to behave. Zhang Xiaohua cursed inwardly. He floated up again and chased after them, completely ignoring the golden long swords that were chasing after him. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was blocking his way again, Yu Zhuochuan narrowed his eyes. He did not reply and turned in another direction. Unfortunately, after a few more times, Zhang Xiaohua crushed a few more defensive jade talismans. the golden long swords disappeared and Yu Zhuochuan stopped. Seeing the light green light shield around Zhang Xiaohua, Yu Zhuochuan knew that Zhang Xiaohua had crushed more than one jade talisman. His face turned pale. You really want my life? Yu Zhuochuan stared at Zhang Xiaohua and asked, unwilling to give up. Hee, do you think you still have a way out? Zhang Xiaohua replied coldly. But, if you let me go, I will give you endless benefits. Zhang Pinger, I will never fight with you again. Yu Zhuochuan's voice became softer and softer. Hee. Zhang Xiaohua did not reply. She pointed her finger, and the flying sword attacked again. Yu Zhuochuan sighed softly. Her fingers exerted force, and the thing she had prepared in her hand was crushed in an instant. A yellow defensive light shield immediately protected her within it. It was the same as what Vice Hall Master Su of the Pill Tower Hall had used previously. Haha. Zhang Xiaohua laughed loudly. He pointed with his finger, and the flying sword stopped in the air. Zhang Xiaohua took out a few light red jade talismans from his bosom and struck them on Yu Zhuochuan's light barrier with crackling sounds. Immediately, several places were set ablaze, and the light barrier was as thin as paper. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Yu Zhuochuan without the slightest bit of pity. His finger moved slightly, and the chasing dream immediately pierced the light barrier like lightning. With a light pop, the earthen yellow light barrier was destroyed, and the chasing dream pierced Yu Zhuochuan's throat. Yu Zhuochuan screamed at the top of his lungs, Ren Xiaoyao, why do you want to kill me? My master is Jing Gang. She won't forgive you. -4. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.